Thank you. Buju Indinawe Mainganag, Mino Gizigad, Renda, Dionne, Madrigal, Indishnakas, Ashwewin, Indigo, Chippewa, Wabazation, Doda, Misquadesi, Waju, Indunjaba, Temecula, Inda. Greetings, all my relatives. It is an honor to be here today. It is a good day. I love the title of this conference, Re-Indigenize ICWA, and I say re-indigenize the world. I want to start with gratitude, first to the ancestors, gratitude to the Kumeyaay people, to Siquan, to all the people that work in ICWA, for the strong hearts that you have in the work that you do. As I said, it is an honor to be here in San Diego, a place that I have lived for, I had lived for many years. And this is actually the place that I gave my first Native American workshop. It was at an Indian conference, maybe Medicine Way, something. And I was a very young psychologist, just out of school, 27, and we didn't have fancy PowerPoints or virtual capability back then. I had a poster board that I had drawn on to give my presentation. And I remember the topic, and the topic was stories and the medicine within them. And for the last 30 years, I've been on a journey, and through different kinds of things, including evidence-based practices and Western science, and I've sort of come full circle back to story. So it really is an honor to be here today. Stories are at the heart of re-indigenization. Stories are at the heart of re-indigenization, and the old stories are for us. They are relevant for our lives today, and they are relevant for the world. And what a gift it was to hear the story that we heard this morning. So today I work with story medicine, helping people find their way, gain wisdom that they're seeking, heal, and thrive. And by thrive, I mean be my deezy win, living the good life. And when I was a young girl, for me, the good life was climbing trees and telling stories. And the picture of the bear is intentional because the very first stories I remember ever hearing were stories that my grandmother told me, and they were always about bears. So thriving, be my deezy one. We must have our vision so that we can live our purpose and we can manifest that into being. We are meant to thrive, and that's why we're here, and that's what colonization interrupted. Thriving, be Medizi win, the good life. Thriving is in our stories. In a Chippewa story, the story of Kichimani II, the Great Spirit, he has a vision. And in that vision, he sees the planets, and he sees the earth, and he sees the animals, and he sees the plants, and he sees the Manitus, the spirit beings, and he manifests that all into being. And he does that with the help of the air and the fire and the water and the earth. He creates his vision. And within each thing that he creates, he puts an essence, a purpose. And he gives another gift also. He also puts within each being a power. And it's the power to manifest that essence, that purpose. And that is the thing that native Olympian Billy Mills, who lost his parents at a young age, talks about when he says you have to dig deep to find that thing. That is the thing that will help you through the struggle, and it's also the thing that will help you to thrive, to live the life that you were meant to live. Re-indigenization is the foundation for finding our vision, living our purpose, and manifesting things into being. It is necessary if we are to live an authentic story. Re-indigenization is how we build our power. Re-indigenization is about remembering. Our stories are at the heart of remembering. Stories tell us how to live, who we are, how to relate to one another, about our place in the world. They tell us what to avoid. And within stories is embedded our worldview. And I believe that at the heart of an Indigenous worldview is Indinawe Mainganug. Most of us have words for this in our language, all my relations, respectful connection to ourselves, each other, and the world. Another story, at a time when things were really difficult on earth for the people, this is a Chippewa story. The 7 grandfathers gifted the people with 7 gifts. They sent a messenger down, and the messenger found a child to give these gifts to. And when the child grew up and was old enough, the child brought the gifts to the people. And these gifts were values that if the people lived by, they would live in harmony and they would struggle less and they would thrive. And there's 2 of these values that I think are part of respectful relationship, respect with ourselves, other people, and the larger world. And one of these is the first first Chippewa word I ever taught my 2 daughters, and that is Manadan Demoan. So this slide actually shows, so live our purpose, manifest it into being. I just wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that 2 plays that my daughters wrote, Menyel and Her Heart, about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, that we recently performed in Sacramento. Thank you. And Wildflower, Indigenous Spirit, that my youngest daughter wrote about traveling through grief and loss. And she did that during the pandemic in a virtual format. So the 7 gifts from the 7 grandfathers. So Manadan Demoan is respect. And in some translations of that word, you come to find it means to go easy on one another. And so Manadan Demoan, and then the other word is Zagi Idawin, which is love. And it's like unconditional love that is mutual. So you put these together, Manadan Demoan and Zagi Idawin, and you get this to go easy on each other with unconditional love that is mutual. And that's the kind of respect that's at the heart of Indigenous worldview, respect for ourselves, other people, and the larger world. So what I'm showing you right now is a story map from a story medicine journey that I went through at the beginning of the pandemic, at a time where I suffered a great loss. And it seemed too difficult to bear. And the reason that I got through those 2 years and am able to be before you today is, in addition to my daughters, but also story. And story, this is the story that really held me. A story can contain unimaginable things. A story can contain grief. A story can contain loss. A story can contain missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, like the play does with Menyel in Her Heart, that we can do in community. So this was a story map that I'm not going to explain today, but it starts out with a traditional story about a really fierce diving duck and named Shingabus. And it's a story that still helps me today as I go forward in my journey in a very different way than I had expected to be at this point in my life. So stories are medicine. And today we live in a world that is very out of balance, a world where the World Health Organization says that depression and anxiety are leading health problems across ethnicities, across ages, across genders, where loneliness has become an epidemic, where children are targeted, animals are going extinct, and the planet is being decimated. So what possibly can stories have to offer in a world such as this? And my answer is everything. I agree with what Leslie Marmon Silko, native storyteller, said when she said, "Don't be fooled by stories. They aren't just entertainment. They're all we have to fight off sickness and death." The stories we believe shape our world, and they shape our children's world. Indian children need to be in Indian homes so they can hear Indian stories, so they can know who they truly are. And that is what will give them not only the strength to make it through the struggle, but the purpose to be who they are meant to be, so they can find their own power and manifest that authentic vision. So I want to share with you a little bit of my journey through Indian child welfare. So I started off college as an art major and somehow ended up becoming a psychologist and learning a lot of knowledge based on Western worldviews and Western ways of thinking. And so by the time I went to graduating to the working on reservations, I really didn't have the tools I needed to work with Native families. And so one of the things I did was I went and sought knowledge from Indian people, Indian spiritual leaders, Indian guides, Indian mental health professionals who had been around for a long time, Art Martinez, who we're gratitude that he's presenting knowledge today. And one of the things I remember, I was at a Society for Indian Psychologists conference in Utah, and there was an elder there, Art Blue, and I went on a walk with him after dinner because he said you should always walk after you eat. And one of the things he said was do no harm, something very simple, but really profound for me. And I really thought about that as I thought about applying Western-based practices as a psychologist to Native people. And I couldn't help but see that the Western lens always made the Indian look worse. And it imposed on us a need to be something that we're not, a colonized European. So in this way, do no harm for me translated to re-indigenize. So from there, I went on a wisdom-seeking journey and learned from Native people. And also, Eduardo and Bonnie Duran's Post-Colonial Psychology became my handbook. And I worked on something called the Indian Family Wellness Assessment, which was sort of based on motivational interviewing, but the core of it was really working with Indian child welfare families and looking at the strengths that they had, and also doing a genogram and going back and looking at history and looking at historical trauma in the family line to be able to give them a more authentic story about how they came to be in the situation they're in, and that it's not a problem in the person, but a problem in history. And that's really important so that they can move forward in a more empowered way, in a motivated way to connect with culture and strengthen their families. And I did this while I was working at the Oregon Social Learning Center, which is at that time housed the preeminent model of Jerry Patterson's something called the coercion theory. And that looked at like family processes that created problematic behavior in children, aggression, substance use. And as is the way with the Western world of coming to know things, that set a precedent, and that Western research model became the framework of the basis for many parenting interventions to address child difficulties that then became considered evidence-based practices. And so I wanted to see if it was possible to like weave together evidence-based practices with cultural knowledge and values. And so I took this idea to the board at Riverside, San Bernardino County Indian Health. And from there, I spent over a decade culturally tailoring evidence-based family strengthening programs for Native families and researching their effectiveness. And while there were some good effects, like we did get reduced parenting stress, reduced child behavior problems, these programs were really about surviving. They weren't about thriving. The programs weren't focused on the essence of who the children were meant to be. And through those years, I learned that no matter how hard I tried, the evidence-based practices, that Western worldview was always in the driver's seat, and the cultural pieces were always in the back seat. At one point, a grantor told me, just leave off the Indian Family Wellness Assessment. It takes too much time. The thing that grounded the family and why are they having the problems they're having, and really educated about the history, and that the problem wasn't in the person, but in the history. And then eventually that grantor said, why don't we just leave out the cultural pieces of the Incredible Years, which was the evidence-based parenting program, and because that'll be easier. And it just became incredibly difficult. And I have never seen a Western evidence-based program, and evidence-based is based on mainstream culture, not on indigenous culture. So I've never seen a Western evidence-based program that doesn't dominate, take over, push to the side the cultural practices and Native worldview. And so when I began to see that clearly, I just want to point out, when I brought the idea to the board many times, Jackie Wise-Spirit, who was then the board chair of Indian Health in Riverside, she would get really mad at me and she would say, we already know this. And she was right. Everything that Western science finds, Native people already knew. They knew how to do these things, and in many cases better. They know how to raise their children well. So when I began to see that clearly, I stopped, got out of the car, and as an elder advised me at the time, went back to the beginning. I needed to remember and to believe. And I'm not saying you should never use any Western science or evidence-based programs. I mean, we use science, we use observational kinds of knowledge, but it's only one way of knowing things, and it's pretty narrow. We have many ways of knowing things, and we use them all. And so if you're working with evidence-based programs, they should never be in the driver's seat for an indigenous program. You know, sometimes they can be in the passenger seat, sometimes they can be in the back seat, sometimes they shouldn't be in the car at all. And so I tell you this part of the work journey so you can understand that I have worked with scientific family strengthening programs, and I can unequivocally tell you that most things Western science finds, Native people already knew, as Jackie Wise-Spirit would tell me. So re-indigenizing, yes. We need to re-indigenize the world. And that's the only way we're going to move from surviving to thriving, to the Bimediziwin, to the good life, to being who we're meant to be at this time on the planet. And really, I think that indigenous knowledge, indigenous people leading the world out of this mess that we are all in from colonization, that's been imposed on everyone, that's led to a world out of balance. And I have to add, at one point, Ramona Cultural Bearer Manuel Hamilton about, you know, why don't we just assimilate to Western culture? I've been in Indian meetings and heard non-Indian people say, well, we already have that, so why don't we just use that, you know, the Western kind of thing? And so Manuel Hamilton would say, why get on a sinking ship? We see that that model isn't working. Thank you. So if we're not on the right path, there's something in us, there's an essence that keeps pushing at us. And through my journey, I was also being pushed, and I took a few side trips. And one of them was a year-long training program I did at UCLA within their Mindfulness Awareness Research Center teacher training program. And mindfulness is a way of being in the world, but it's also a skill that you can learn through contemplative practices. And contemplative practices people had all over the world, and indigenous people have contemplative practices. Many of them were outlawed, but we have them. So I was first exposed to mindfulness in my 20s through a Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. And I was really struck by the way he talked, the way he told stories. He talked about how important the ancestors were, our connection to nature, and the value of the children. And it just sounded so indigenous to me. So a few decades later, UCLA neuroscience, the field of neuroscience started getting really popular, and mindfulness training programs started popping up in universities, and UCLA was one of them. And so that's how I ended up there. But what really got me going with mindfulness was that there are areas in our brain that correspond to self to self, self to other, and they call it transcendent self, which is all my relations. And when you do mindfulness practices, when you're present, you know, when you smudge and you're careful with your thoughts, you're really present in that, those areas of your brain light up, self to self, self to other, and self to the universe. And then the intuition part of your brain lights up, Nibwa Khan, your wisdom. And the well-being center also lights up. And when I heard that research, to me, this is an all my relations practice. So mindfulness is about being present. It's about being kind, which is really at the heart of Indinawema Inganug, all my relations. And it's about waking up our intuitive knowledge, which colonization has really pushed down. And it's what social worker Michael Yellowbird has termed neural decolonization. It's a way of decolonizing our brains. It really works out our brains. So as part of the UCLA program, I had to build a mindfulness curriculum. And I wanted to build a decolonizing, re-indigenizing curriculum. And I was working with Indian child welfare families. And so I designed a series of workshops for families. And that actually eventually became my book, The Mindful Family Guidebook, that has 3 pillars that I wanna talk about: ancestral strength and knowledge, the spirit of respect, and cultivating joy. And so for ancestral strength and knowledge, I want to tell you a story. And it's the Paiute story of the North Star. And in this story, there is a mountain sheep named Naga. And Naga, more than anything else, loves to climb mountains. And he also loves to please his father, Shinho, and luckily climbing mountains pleases his father. And so one day, Naga wakes up, and it's this day that feels like not just any day, it feels like something is gonna happen today. And so he goes out and he looks for the mountain that he's gonna climb that day. And he wants it to be a mountain that he's never climbed before. And so he walks along, and eventually he finds that mountain. And it is the biggest mountain in the area. And it's really hard to get up. So he tries to get up, and he keeps falling, and he's getting pretty scuffed up, but he doesn't give up. And so eventually he finds a way. And it's not a path that goes directly up. He has to go down first. So he goes down, and he finds this crevasse, and he's walking, and eventually it turns and it goes up. And so he walks and he walks and he walks, and he walks so long that the weather starts to change, and the wind starts to blow, and it starts to rain, and then boulders start coming at him as the ground is shaking. So at first he tries to flee, but there's too many rocks. And then he tries to fight, but they're too big. So when we can't fight and we can't flee, we freeze. And so that's what he does. And he puts his head down and he goes into a freezing position and he just waits until finally the rocks stop coming. And then he opens his eyes, he comes out of freeze, and it's very dark. All the rocks have filled in this crevasse that he's in, but he sees a little bit of light. And so that's what he starts moving to. And he pushes and he pushes and he pushes, and eventually he gets out. And he looks behind him and he sees that he can't exactly go back the way that he came from because it's all filled up, but he can go forward. And that's where he was going anyway. So he starts to walk, and he walks and he walks and he walks, and he gets to the top of that mountain. And he keeps walking. He walks right into the sky, and he keeps going until he finds a place that feels just right. And it's there that he stops and rests. Now, meanwhile, his father is down in the village, and they are in a drumming circle, and they're drumming. Shinho is his father, and Shinho notices that Naga's not there. And so he stops and steps out of the circle, and he goes to look for his son, and he goes to the mountains. And it's a full moon that night, so you can see pretty good. And he looks and he looks and he looks, and he sees that mountain, and he knows that's the one his son has gone up. And so his eyes follow that mountain up to the top, and then he keeps going up into the sky. And he sees his son there. And he wants to collapse because he knows that that means his son can't be here. He doesn't collapse, though. He manages to keep his heart open. And in doing that, he sends his love to his son. And that love transforms his son into the star that shines like 2,500 suns, to the Giwi Denenang, to the North Star, the star that has been guiding our ancestors in the Northern Hemisphere for centuries, and the star that is still there today to help us to find our way. So I have two questions that I want to share with you. And I have them as questions because we're working in story. We often go on a quest. And the first one is, how did Naga have the strength and the vision to know and live his purpose? Naga knew where he came from. And that helped him find his purpose. And we have that in us, to not just survive, but thrive, to live the life that we're meant to live. That's what Indian people do. That's why we're still here. And that's what people working in ICWA do. They always find a way. Indian people have never lost the value of the love they have for their children, the knowledge that children are gifts. And one of the earliest stories I ever worked with Indian children was a Zuni story called Dragonfly's Tale that talked about how the corn maidens blessed the children when the village had lost everything. And it was the children that, through the children, that the abundance to the village returned. And the children were blessed in the story because of the kindness that they had shown. So our ancestral strength and knowledge give us our authentic North Star, not a digitized one that tries to make us into something we're not. We need our authentic North Star, and that comes from our ancestral strength and knowledge that can guide us through the dark, the struggles, so that we can always find the light and we can always find the path forward. The second question is, how did Shinho, his father, keep his heart open in the midst of such pain? And I have often thought of Shinho in my life when I've gone through difficult things. I certainly thought of him during the pandemic. How did he keep his heart open? I recently spent a year studying at Stanford in their applied compassion training program, and I spent the entire year working with a story about Ikwe, sky woman, who falls from the sky and uses her essence to create North America. And she does this out of her compassion for the suffering of the animals. And during that year, I often thought of Shinho also, because when his son died in all that grief, how did he manage to keep his heart open? How do we manage to do that in the face of unimaginable things? I don't think Shinho just decided to keep his heart open. I think he had stories that taught him how to do this, and I think he had ceremony, and I think he had regular practices that he did that were accessible. There are practices that we can learn that can help strengthen us, that can help keep our hearts open. I call them heart medicine practices, and I think Shinho was doing heart medicine practices, and that is how he was able to do what he did. The second pillar I talked about of mindful families is the spirit of respect, and there are kindness practices that are very accessible that we can learn, and some of these practices are being studied in Western science. Barbara Friedrichsen, who studies positive emotions at Chapel Hill, North Carolina, looked at one such practice about just sending kind wishes. What does that do? And one of the things she found is it actually helps your heart rate variability. It helps your heart beat in just the right rhythm that's healthiest. And so I'd like to just share a short modified version of that practice with you right now. And so just take a moment to take a breath. Just feel one breath going in and going out. And you can leave your eyes open if you want to, just find a place to watch them, or you can close them. Find a place to put your eyes if they're open so you're not having to stare at anything. And just bring to mind somebody that it's just really easy for you to wish good things for. You just really want the best for them. Could be an animal even. Just bring to mind a being that it's easy. You know, picture them or have a felt sense of them. And then I'm going to say a few phrases, and just in your mind, just repeat these phrases to that being. And you can also change them and make your own phrases if you'd like to. So directing these phrases to that being, may you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And then with that being still there, include yourself in that circle. And again, we're going to repeat the phrases. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we live with ease. And then one more time, let's expand that to all four directions, to all beings. That includes all the Indian children and families and all of you. May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings live with ease. And just take another breath and just notice what that feels like to send those wishes, and letting whatever your experience is be what it is. That is an All My Relations practice. So the third pillar of mindful families is cultivating joy. And there are a lot of things that that are here that we have that actually can bring joy, but we need to notice them and we need to be present with them. And we need to do that for at least 15 seconds for it to get into our emotional memory. And when we do that, it acts like a vitamin. It's helpful for us. So cultivating joy, I really like to do a joy building practice right now, but I'm coming to the close of our time together. And so I want to say that re-indigenization requires us to be who we're meant to be, to ground ourselves in our worldview, which holds our values. It's why we do what we do. The values embedded in our worldview are our North Star, and they are our guide. And like fractals, which are repeating patterns, we see them everywhere in our stories. Indian children need Indian homes so they can learn Indian stories. So it's easier for them to know their essence, build their power, and manifest their vision, to become who they are meant to be. So I want to close with a call to action. I like the theme of the conference, Rise Up, be relentlessly fierce, dig deep. Billy Mills did that. It won him an Olympic gold medal. Find your purpose embedded within your ancestral gifts. Keep your heart open. It turned Shinho's sun into the North Star. There is so much power in love, and that is where your greatest power will come from. Go easy on yourself and others with unconditional mutual love. Cultivate joy and laugh a lot. It takes a lot more muscles to frown than it does to smile. Know your stories, sit with them, learn how to listen. Be Indian, never stop. The world needs us. Become who you are meant to be, and you will give those around you the greatest gift. Use your medicine. Be relentlessly fierce. Re-indigenize ICWA, re-indigenize the world. Shimi Gwech, thank you.
We're running just a little bit late, so I'm going to ask the next panel to come up, please. This is the panel on legislative and litigation updates. See a couple of the usual suspects. Good to see you. So it's just the three of you. I'm going to hand this off to the biggest little package of energy I have ever met, combined with an amazing intelligence, who is the legal director for California Tribal Families Coalition. So, Kim.
Thank you. A very common thing I need to do, move the mic down. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It truly is amazing to have folks in person. Of course, thank you to everybody online, wherever you are. My name is Kimberly Clough. I'm the legal director at California Tribal Families Coalition. And I just want to start by first, just very deep gratitude to Sequan for hosting this event. We are all so grateful to be here in person. Secondly, I would really like to take a moment and thank the chair of the CTFC board, Chairman Smith from the Paula Band. Thank you so much for being here with us and for your relentless leadership of the organization. We also have the most recent member of the board of directors, new chairwoman, Janet Bill. Janet, or Chairwoman Bill, if you wouldn't mind raising a hand, I know you're here. Thank you. So grateful for the founding leadership, the new leadership. This is, as was stated earlier, an unprecedented time in the Indian Child Welfare Act. And so all those skills and ability and support are incredibly powerful. And then also, oh, I see that we also, if I may, also a tribal leader, Marianne McGovern, who has joined us this morning as well. Marianne, thank you so much. And I just want to just also thank the entirety of the board. I know some of the board are also joining us online. So I'm going to hand the panel over to my colleague, Michelle. But what I want to do is just let you know this panel, our goal is to talk about what is happening from a legislative perspective, what is happening from a litigation perspective. So what you're going to be hearing about is not only Brackeen, but also other litigation that is underway, and then also legislative efforts by a whole amazing group of advocates and folks who are doing incredible work in this space. I see another board member who I cannot overlook, Board Councilwoman Catalina Chacon. Thank you very much for being here. Again, the leadership and all of you have a leadership role. And so we just thank you for that. But the time and dedication that these elected leaders who take away from their incredible workload of being leaders within their tribe to be at the forefront of this work is just so deeply appreciated. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Michelle, to get us truly going.
Great, thank you, Kimberly. Minokajab and Dawandasuna, Michelle Castine, Indigenous, Bawating and Donjaba. So good morning, relatives. My name is Michelle. I'm a policy analyst at the California Tribal Families Coalition, and I come from Bawating, which is the place where the rivers flow, or Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan now. And so I was extra thrilled to have a fellow Anishinaabe in the crowd today with Dr. Madrigal and hearing her words this morning. I am actually going to start by just acknowledging and giving a huge thank you to Micah. So Micah Yarandi is our senior attorney of legal and program services at CTFC. And Micah was going to join us for this panel and help moderate and move us through the speakers today. But as you can see, she is keeping things going today and has done so much planning and so much work. So I just want to give her a big thank you right now. So I have the honor of introducing the other panelists, and then I will jump into a legislative update from the coalition. So on the panel with us this morning, we have myself. So again, I'm a policy analyst and I work with our policy director, Blair Cruiser, who is joining us virtually this morning. We also have retired Ambassador Keith Harper, who currently serves as a partner at Jenner & Block. Mr. Harper is from the Cherokee Nation and is the first Native person to become or to be named a U.S. ambassador. So Mr. Harper is joining us virtually, and he will be telling us more about the Brackeen case and other impact litigation that is in the works. All of these speakers have bios in the program booklet, so I hope you can read more about their accomplishments there. We will hear more from Kimberly Clough, our legal director at the coalition. Kimberly, in all of her free time, also just recently graduated with a master's degree from Berkeley. Yeah, super exciting. But she's worked in this space for many years, working in federal Indian law and especially with the Indian Child Welfare Act, and her impact on ICWA work here in California is near immeasurable, including spearheading the drafting and passage of the tribal customary adoption. We will also be joined by Diana Wagner, who is a health program specialist from the California Department of Social Services, and Heather Zanoni, who is an IPA with the Administration for Native Americans with Casey Family Programs. Heather also has been working in this space and has been a fierce advocate for many years. She has her JD and has worked in tribal policy and child welfare policy for over 20 years. So we're thrilled that she is able to join the panel as well. In the program book, you'll see that Vice Chair Siva was going to join us, but unfortunately is not able to make it. But he also has just done so much work in this space, especially as it pertains to the Brackeen case. And so we'll be looking forward to an update on that case in a little while. So that is our great panel here to do the legislative and litigation update. I'm going to start us off with some legislative information from the coalition, starting with a couple of bills that were passed in the last several years that CTFC worked on. And so really what I'll be talking about today and what the coalition really focuses on is both passing legislation to improve child welfare policy for tribes here in California, but also importantly, the implementation of that legislation once it passes. And so looking back several years ago, there were two bills that the coalition worked on with the help of many of you to pass, and these are now in the implementation stage. And so AB 686 was a bill that we worked on with Assemblymember Waldron back in 2019, and it is now very much in the implementation stage, going through a series of being put into regulations and getting guidance out so that it can really be seen on the ground. This bill clarified placement preference approval standards and secured remote appearance rights for tribes. And so what that means is that the Indian Child Welfare Act, of course, required that when homes are approved for Indian children, the prevailing social and cultural standards of the Indian community must be applied. When California went through a rework of the home approval process in recent years, the resource family approval process, that process did not include guidance on how to apply the prevailing social and cultural standards of tribal communities. And so what we did with 686 is put language into place so that that could happen. And as I said, it's now in the implementation phase of trying to get guidance out to county child welfare workers on how to do that and how to apply those social and cultural standards. Importantly, the bill also secured remote appearance rights for tribes. As we know, tribes are often located far from where their court appearances are for ICWA cases. And so this bill put the authority into place for tribes to appear in any ICWA case anywhere remotely at no cost to the tribe. We've now seen some pushback on that. The Judicial Council of California implemented rules, not tribal specific rules, but just rules in the past year as an outcome of COVID-19. That put different standards and different processes in place that would change tribes being able to appear remotely in their cases. Fortunately, again, as this is in an implementation phase, we've been working on another legislative fix to that this year through AB 2960, which is the judicial omnibus this year. And we are very confident that that measure will move forward and this language that was passed in 686 will be protected. And so tribes will continue to be able to appear remotely at no cost. The next bill is AB 3176. So the coalition worked in 2018, again with Assemblymember Waldron on passing 3176. And what this bill really did was it put the Bureau of Indian Affairs regulations that came out in 2016 related to ICWA into California law. And so the coalition again worked with many of you, many of our tribal leaders to ensure that those provisions were put into California law, and we're now in an implementation phase. And so CDSS has done pretty extensive tribal consultation over the past 6 months on a series of all county letters. All county letters are what we refer to as ACLs, of course, provide guidance to child welfare workers about how to put laws into their practice. And so we expect that that series of ACLs related to 3176 will come out in the next coming months. The ACLs will accompany the regulations that accompany AB 3176 law changes. And again, hopefully those will be coming out this summer. We may hear more about each of these implementation phases as we go throughout the day and hear from different speakers, but you can just see on the screen here in front of you the process of implementation that we've been going through with AB 686. Again, lots of tribal consultation, really with the goal in mind to ensure that the guidance is put out there so that child welfare workers can put the laws into practice so that they actually have meaning. And so you'll see again, the efforts that the coalition is doing to make sure that that happens in a good way. So those bills, as I said, are in the implementation phase. We also have several recent bills from last year that we were successful with. So the coalition sponsored AB 1055, which is a bill that we worked on with many non-tribal child welfare organizations to ensure that educational protections that all foster children get also apply to Indian children when they are in the tribal child welfare system. And so this includes things like timely transfer of school records, ensuring that Indian children in tribal child welfare systems get credit for completing coursework at other schools. So when they're moving from school to school, those protections are in place for tribal child welfare children as well. Also last year, we were successful with AB 873, which is a bill that made it possible for removing tribal share of costs for certain tribal agreements with the state. That leads us to the legislative efforts of this year. So in this year's session in 2022, we are working with Assemblymember Ramos on AB 1862, which is hopefully something that you've either received emails from us on or that you've heard us talk about, because it is moving forward. We're very confident that it's moving forward. Actually, today it's in hearing in the Senate Committee on Human Services. And this bill it's entitled the Tribally Approved Homes Compensation Program, and it really came out of some listening sessions that the coalition held several years ago, in which we heard that for those of you who are already approving homes, so that authority is in place for tribes to approve homes, when our Indian children are in the county child welfare systems, that there's no funding to do that, and that's creating a real gap. And so this bill aims to fix that. It would approve $75,000 per tribe to do the tribally approved homes process, which we know is very expensive. So it would allocate $75,000 per tribe per year in an ongoing way. And as I said, that bill is in hearing this morning. I hear that it's doing well. We expect it to move forward. And we've put out many calls for tribal support letters. And so just a huge thank you to the many tribes who have submitted support letters on this effort, because that's why it has been moving forward. It has a big price tag and has been able to move forward because lawmakers are hearing that we really need this and that this will move us forward in a good way. Finally, the coalition is working on 2 budget proposals this year, one again related to AB 1862 and one aimed at putting money into the system to put legal representation into place for tribes in their ICWA cases. So again, here are just a few more details about AB 1862. The bill, as I said, is moving forward. The template letters are online, but we feel good about where it's at right now, and we'll put out another call if needed for those support letters moving forward. That is the legislative update at this time, and I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Harper if he's joining us virtually.
Okay, this is Keith. Can everybody hear me? Apparently I cannot start the video here. So, well, it's good to be back with you all. I was going to talk about the Burkine case and where we stand on it. As you know, the case started in October of 2017 when a group of families, non-Indian families seeking to adopt Native kids, sued the Department of Interior, alleging that the Indian Child Welfare Act was unconstitutional on 5 separate constitutional grounds. They were joined by the state of Texas, who has the state's Attorney General's office has a very close relationship. Let me do it. Has a very close relationship with the attorneys that are representing the non-Indian families. From now on, I'm just going to call them the adopting families. 2 of the grounds I will concentrate most on today are on equal protection, and the other is what's called an anti-commandeering. Equal protection is a charge that a law, federal law or state law, does not treat people equally. So it does not treat members of different races equally or members of different national origins equally. So it's a sort of discrimination-based constitutional claim. And they're arguing here that Indian children are treated differently from non-Indian children. I'll first just run through where what we call the procedural posture of the case. So that case was filed. We represent, at Jenner and Block, represent 3 of the 5 intervening tribes, specifically Morongo Band, Cherokee Nation, and Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. And just to be clear, I want to say it's really been something that these tribes have invested in the defense of the Indian Child Welfare Act, and I really commend them for that, for jumping into this case. The 2 other the 2 other tribes, Quinault Indian Nation and the Navajo Nation. After full briefing in the district court, a very conservative judge in Texas, well known to not like any progressive legislation, struck down the Indian Child Welfare Act on virtually all the grounds argued. So that got appealed by the United States, and it got appealed by the tribes. And it went up to what's called the Fifth Circuit, United States Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. After full briefing and oral argument, a 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit basically upheld ICWA in its entirety and reversed the district court. One of the 3 judges dissented only on anti-commandeering grounds. Now, what is anti-commandeering? The anti-commandeering is a principle that emerges from the Constitution and basically says that the federal government cannot commandeer, cannot tell state legislatures or state officials what to do. And what that means is that say there is a gun control legislation from the federal government. Well, the federal government can't say, state police, you must carry out our laws. And so you must make certain background checks, for example. That's not allowed. But if it's just a general rule and it happens to apply to states, then that is fine. Also, there's no prohibition on directing state courts what to do, because there's a clause in the Constitution called the Supremacy Clause, which says federal law is supreme. So again, the Fifth Circuit from the panel held in the entirety for the tribes and for the United States. That then went to what is called, this is a rare thing to happen, but then all the active judges on the Fifth Circuit voted to hear the case again. And so we are before, I think, 16 judges on what's called the en banc proceeding. And so the matters were rebriefed. The Fifth Circuit then handed down 315 pages of decision. It upheld ICWA on most regards. And to the extent that it struck down aspects on equal protection, it did so in ways that are not precedential. And that's because it upheld the district court on an 8-8 vote, which means it doesn't have any precedential impact. Nevertheless, on some anti-commandeering grounds, the Indian Child Welfare Act was struck down, most particularly and most concerning the active efforts aspect of that active efforts must be utilized in a proceeding. So now there are 4 petitions for certiorari. That means petitions to ask the Supreme Court of the United States to hear the case. All 4 were granted. And so now we're before the Supreme Court. We expect to have oral argument in October or November of this year, 2022. We have received what are called the topside briefs, the briefs from the adopting families and the state of Texas. And then our brief and the brief of the SG, the United States, basically, will be due August 5th. So that's the calendar. That's where things stand. As far as the briefing from the other side, there was nothing particularly unexpected. I think there were some extraordinarily radical ideas in their briefing. The one, for example, is that using blood quantum for tribal membership is somehow suspect and requires and is a race-based discrimination. So that's, obviously a view that has not been is not shared as far as we know by any of the justices, but they put that forward. They read the history in very disingenuous ways, talking about how the Articles of Confederation, for example, provided more powers to the central government over Indian affairs than the Constitution. That's just inaccurate. So it's both radical and disingenuous, but we'll be prepared to answer it on all fours. I do want to say, because I make 2 points that are, I think, particularly important. One is, and I think that the tribes that asked us to represent them to intervene recognize this very early on. And the recent briefs filed by the opposition are proof positive of this. And that is this. This case has never been about ICWA itself. Not really. This case has been about trying to bring down the entirety of federal Indian law. It challenges the fundamental base precepts of Indian law. There's a case that many of you may know called Morton v. Moncarey. And that case says that when the federal government passes legislation that treats Indians differently from others, that is not a racial distinction. That is a political distinction. And that's because those Indians are really citizens or members of Indian tribes. And it's because of the political relationship between the members and Indian tribes that they are treated differently for purposes of federal law. And if you undercut that principle, then you fundamentally undercut some certain base precepts of the of Indian law. It's not surprising that some of these same arguments by some of the same law firms are being raised now in a court case in the Pacific Northwest challenging the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. Exact same arguments: anti-commandeering, equal protection, making the same contentions. Because it's not only, it is about the Indian Child Welfare Act, but it's not really only about the Indian Child Welfare Act. It's a much broader proposition. The second thing I would say is you really need to pay attention to who is on the other side. And who is on the other side are basically the state of Texas, and we know how ideologically driven the Attorney General of Texas is. I mean, they're wanting to jail people, jail children in the southern border. They're wanting to take all kinds of heinous acts throughout the state of Texas. This is a person driven by ideology, and a state that has no business trying to have more children in their foster care system. In fact, a Texas court back in 2015 found the foster care system of the state of Texas, quote, broken, that, quote, children almost uniformly leave state custody more damaged than when they entered. Now, that is the system that they want to throw Indian children in, that they're arguing in the Supreme Court to throw Indian children in that broken system. The situation is so bad that Texas courts placed the system under conservatorship. And 2 years later, Texas was still violating the law, and, quote, that the Texas child welfare system continued to expose children to an unreasonable risk of serious harm, end quote. Now, this is from the state courts, federal courts in Texas about the Texas child welfare system. And the state of Texas says, no, Indian children should be thrown into this system. And that's their argument on, that it's discrimination to exclude Indian children from their broken system. The other entity that we think is ideologically driven are the ones that are supporting the efforts of the families. In particular, we have to look at what's called the Goldwater Institute. Now, the Goldwater Institute and its like-minded, they're ideologues. That's what they are. What they want is every part of American law to reflect their ideology, their radical ideology. And when I say it's radical, don't just take my word for it. They're named after Barry Goldwater, who ran for president in 1964, the Goldwater Institute. So Barry Goldwater is their ideological North Star. And what did Martin Luther King Jr. say about Barry Goldwater on race issues? Mr. Goldwater may not be a racist in and of himself, but he gives aid and comfort to the racist. What did Barry Goldwater say about and he voted against the 1964 Civil Rights Act because he was so ideologically driven. He called the Brown v. Board of Education a federal overreach, a case that struck down segregation in the South. He's called a federal overreach. So this is their ideological North Star, and these are the folks trying to lecture Indian country, tribal leaders, tribes, Indian families about what is and isn't racism. So that's what we're up against. It's like this: they're driven by this antagonism towards Indian law. They're driven by this ideology that has long been wrong about race issues. And at the end of the day, this is not a race issue. Warren B. Monterey makes that very clear. These are for citizens or members of federally recognized tribes. So I would also mention that there is a amicus process going on for the tribal leadership. There is a tribal amicus brief that is being drafted by the Native American Rights Fund. We think that tribes should try to join that brief if they care about ICWA. Obviously, by your presence here today, you care a lot about ICWA. There's other very effective briefs by some historians and legal scholars. There's a very effective brief by Casey and other entities, because here's what happens when you're not driven by ideology. Then you ask whether or not the law in reality pragmatically positively affects or negatively affects Indian children. And what Casey says, and what other folks who are in the space say, is that Indian Child Welfare Act, ICWA, is the gold standard for child welfare. And the reason they say that is because it tries to keep families together, Indian families and non-Indian families. It's not about necessarily Indian families. In a lot of circumstances, the kids are placed with a non-Indian extended family. But we know that where there's a kinship tie, the results are better. And so that is a very powerful brief. There's going to be other briefs about that demonstrate the continuing need for the Indian Child Welfare Act. Some of the briefs on the other side, some of the amicus support briefs on the other side argue that there might have been a problem, 40 years ago, but it's not a problem anymore. Well, as many of you know, it's still a problem today. And of course, without the Indian Child Welfare Act, that problem would be exacerbated tenfold. So why don't I stop there? I know that there's a tight agenda here. I'm going to turn it over to Kimberly. But I'm happy to, if there's any specific questions, I have a little bit more time. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you so much. So 2 words that Keith just shared really resonated with me: radical and disingenuous. And that absolutely is what the forces on the other side of this case are. They are radical and they are disingenuous. So how do we meet that? How do we defeat that? What does it look like to overcome radical and disingenuous? What resonated with me, what Keith triggered for me was united and truth-telling. You can beat radical, you can beat disingenuous when you come with united voice, a united voice that's grounded in truth, the truth of history and the truth of today. You know, Keith pointed out that the other side on Brackeen doesn't actually say ICWA doesn't work. They don't have data that says ICWA is bad for Native kids. They say it, but they don't have data. Every single tribe, there's not one tribe in the United States that has said the Brackeen litigation is good, that ICWA should be shut down. Keith mentioned the amicus briefs. The list is so long, there's been lots of discussion. So many people want to step up and support the Indian Child Welfare Act. We're having a discussion about how do we combine, how do we get these folks into one brief? Because you can't have 100 amicus briefs head to the Supreme Court, right? The ideal number is a lot smaller. We have now the American Academy of Pediatrics saying ICWA is good for children's mental and physical health. That's really powerful. These are not folks that are, it's not a Native organization. These are people who treat kids in their offices and they say ICWA is good. So speaking that truth, that can overcome that disingenuous. Speaking the truth of why is it that we are in this racial reckoning? Why is it that day after day, more graves are found at the boarding schools? Because that's the truth. That's the real history. So the united voice telling the Supreme Court, don't listen to disingenuous. Don't listen to those lies. Listen to the united voice of all of the tribes in the United States. That's what can overcome the other side. So I just thank you, Keith, for just those powerful words, really appreciate it. And the thing that's so kind of uplifting is that there is a united voice. 108 of the 109 tribes, when we had the tribal amicus brief last round, 108 of 109, and this time it's going to be 109. Every single tribe in California. Every single tribe. The Attorney General brief, the brief that attorneys general signed on to, led by the California Attorney General. The attorneys general around the country, they signed on to a brief, and those attorneys general, they represented over 80% of the tribes of the United States, over 80% of the Native people of the United States. That's huge. That's a united voice coming from attorneys general. So the possibility and the ability and the power are there as long as they are united and they speak the truth. So I'm going to talk about something that is not very splashy, that is a little bit behind the scenes and kind of the opposite of the Brackeen case, right? So Brackeen is very big and very public. As much as the other side, the Goldwater Institute folks, and I'm going to call it out, right? The folks that are working hard and not to strike down ICWA, that's not the goal, right? The goal is to undo the concepts of tribal nationhood. They work up front, but they also work behind in policy. And sometimes it's kind of boring and you kind of have to go down into the policy rabbit hole. So the sunset litigation is about, it's a lawsuit. CTFC was one of the lead plaintiffs in the lawsuit. And here's what it was doing. Under the last administration, there was this interesting rule. It has a great name. It's securing updated and necessary statutory evaluation. Doesn't sound very harmful. It's not like the anti-ICWA bill, right? The acronym for it is sunset, the sunset rule. Okay, also, I like sunsets. Sunset sounds okay. And its point publicly was, oh, we've got way too many bureaucratic regulations over at HHS, Health and Human Services, on the but too many regulations, so many regulations. let's take a look and get rid of some of those bureaucratic rules, 17,000 bureaucratic rules that the sunset rule would have wiped away if they hadn't been reviewed on time. And the time period is very small. Okay, I'm a fan of getting rid of bureaucratic rules. What happens when you don't consult with tribes and you pass a law that says guidance and regulation that tribes rely on are going to be wiped away, and tribes aren't going to have a voice, and suddenly tribes are going to say, wait a second, how do we protect our elders? How do we protect our communities? How do we protect our kids? Oh, they wiped all those rules away. Now we don't know, and we have tremendous uncertainty within tribal governance. That's what the sunset rule was about. So a bunch of amazing advocates got together and said, hey, we need to challenge this sunset rule. We need to sue. We need to stop the implementation of a federal law that was passed without any consultation with tribes. That's problematic enough, right? Because if the federal government is not held to account when they violate rules around tribal consultation, they need to be held to account. And when that rule that they pass without tribal consultation has the ability to wipe away guidance and necessary regulation that tribes need, somebody has to hold them accountable. So a lawsuit's filed. We call it the sunset rule litigation. CTFC and many other advocacy groups got together and said, this is not okay. Now this, again, it's not the most kind of exciting, it's not Brackeen, nobody's, on television. But I will say the good news is, guess what? We won. We sued, we were united, we told the truth, and we went to the Biden administration and said, this has to stop. It took a couple of, it wasn't like they just said, okay, we still had to push and sue, and there's lots of briefs, but we prevailed. And what that tells us is that, number one, holding to account is really important. Number two, paying attention. These things happen in back rooms. They can sometimes be quiet, right? You have a frontal assault like Brackeen, and you have backroom dealings like the sunset rule. And we have to be vigilant on both sides of those. So the sunset rule has been finally fully repealed, and it goes away. We are very excited about that. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Heather Zanoni, who I'm very, very excited agreed to step up. Oh, and I do want to say, if we can all just keep Vice Chairman Siva in our thoughts. He has a kiddo who had a little fall. That's why he was not able to join us today. So he apologizes, sends his well wishes from the ER. Everyone's fine. But we have the incredible pleasure of having Heather Zanoni step in. Heather is going to talk about the AFGARS litigation, which is, again, a very similar kind of behind the scenes, very policy heavy. So we're thrilled to have her because she's a policy wonk to explain it to us. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Kimberly. I hate following litigators, and now I'm falling for the best. I am definitely like more of a behind a computer, maybe sending some emails and writing regulations person. So I'm not going to be as good of a storyteller, but because my primary interest is in the thing that's going to put you all asleep, which is the intersection of policy and data. And one of the things I've been fighting for over 20 years is improved data on Indian children and the implementation of the Indian Child Welfare Act. So I started in California, and then 10 years ago, I went to Washington, DC and started working on this. I was part of the team that drafted the ICWA regulation. I was part of the team that drafted the AFGARS regulation. So this is something I care very, very deeply about. Both those regulations were promulgated finally in 2016. AFGARS stands for the Adoption and Foster Care Analysis Reporting System. That is the federal data set that all states are required to report specific data elements to. The feds use that data for all kinds of things. I served for 4 years in Congress with Congresswoman Karen Bass. She uses that data to make determinations about where to put her legislative energy and the legislative energy of the Congressional Caucus on Foster Youth. So Congress uses that data. Practitioners use that data, national child welfare organizations use that data, and of course, Children's Bureau in the Department of Health and Human Services uses that data for implementation of Title 4E and Title 4B, the family preservation and foster care placement funding. Oh, I also forgot to say, while I work for Casey Family Programs, and while I will be placed as a subject matter expert in the Administration for Native Americans, I want to be clear that I'm speaking for myself today. I'm not representing the Administration for Native Americans or Casey. They have their own views on things. I'm speaking from my personal experience and my history. So I told you that in 2016, we finally promulgated an updated AFCARS rule. Originally, there was no data collected at all on foster care and adoption. It was collected voluntarily in the 80s, so states could just report whatever they wanted to report. And Congress felt that wasn't very helpful for them to make decisions about foster care policy. So they passed a law saying actually states have to report the data, and the Secretary of Health and Human Services can determine what data is helpful for them to report. And it's a really broad mandate. It's the demographic information for the children and families and child welfare and related. So it's very broad. So Children's Bureau did finally pass a rule in 1993 that had some very general information that states have been reporting all of this time. And we started in the early 2000s trying to update that rule, add additional data elements for states to report what's helpful. If you guys have been around a while, you've probably made a lot of public comments on what's important. And one of the main things that tribes would say is, you guys really need to collect data on the implementation of the Indian Child Welfare Act so we can see both statewide and nationally how the different elements of the Indian Child Welfare Act are being implemented. And I totally agreed with that. So under the Obama administration in 2016, we determined that our AFCAR statute, it's not ours anymore, I don't work for these people, sorry. The Children's Bureau determined that they had the authority under the AFCAR statute to collect that information. And so then we went about collecting it, and tribes wrote comments saying what they thought should be collected. And we looked at the ICWA regulation to kind of determine like what information should we be collecting, should they be collecting to determine which pieces of the Indian Child Welfare Act are being implemented well, where there needs to be more training, where there needs to be more resources. So all information that both the White House, HHS, and Congress and states could really use. The final AFCARS regulation was published in 2016. It included in-depth Indian Child Welfare Act implementation data, starting with a requirement to inquire whether or not the Indian Child Welfare, a requirement to report whether or not the social worker had inquired whether or not the Indian Child Welfare Act applies. And if they did, the next question is whether or not the Indian Child Welfare Act applies, and that's the court decision. And then if the court determined that ICWA doesn't apply, no other data elements related to ICWA were required to be reported, except if a parent was a tribal member, if the child was a tribal member. So there was a big off-ramp. So majority of the data elements related to the Indian Child Welfare Act were not even required to be recorded, collected, recorded, reported, if ICWA didn't apply. But in 2020, there was an election. And when the new administration came in, they thought that the AFCARS data regulation was overly burdensome on states. The 2016 regulation does a really good job of analyzing the burden on states, and they took public comment on the issue. They determined that it wasn't overly burdensome, but the new administration did. So they put a stop on collecting the ICWA related data elements. There were also 3 data elements related to LGB, sorry, no T involved at the time, but LGB data elements, whether or not the child was in foster care related to their LGB identity, and then whether or not parents or foster parents or adoptive parents were LG or B. So in 2020, the Trump administration decided to to propose to reduce the burden on states by reducing the number of ICWA data elements and probably the LGB related elements. Everybody submitted more comments. Every single tribe that submitted comments said this is a terrible idea. We need that data. States like California, Washington, Alaska, I'm going to leave out some that were also great, Arizona, states with high rates of Indian children in their foster care systems all said this is data that should be reported, that we already collect, that should be reported. But when they finalized their 2020 rewrite, it did not include a big chunk of the Indian child welfare data elements, and it didn't include the data related to LGB parents. It did keep whether or not the child was in foster care as a result of something about their gender identity or sexual orientation. So we looked at how they promulgated this rule, and we thought, and at this time I'm in Congress, and I thought, I don't think they followed the Administrative Procedures Act. They didn't respond to all the tribal comments. They didn't respond to Congress's comments because we wrote those. So, and so we were upset. They're supposed to do that. And so we sued. And not we, this is again, not we. This is Lambda Legal, California Tribal Families Coalition on behalf of member tribes. And then there was a private law firm, and I can't remember who they are right now. Sorry. So they sued under the theory that the Administrative Procedures Act wasn't followed. And then from Congress's side, we felt that that took away essential information that members of Congress needed to legislate. The other thing they did in 2020 is they delayed the timeline for reporting. So the 2016 regulation would have had everybody reporting, all the states reporting all the data 2021 or 2020, and then they delayed it by 2 years. So the new AFCARS data will be submitted by states. The first new AFCARS data will be submitted by states October 2022. And if you're wondering when that data is going to be available to you, it takes them about 3 to 6 months to clean up the data and publish it so that it's available. So we got about 6 months after October before it's really available. I'm not really sure where the lawsuit is, but I know that there were discussions with the Biden administration on settling. And my theory was always that the last appropriately promulgated rule was the 2016 rule. Since the 2020 rule was not appropriately promulgated, did not follow the Administrative Procedures Act, that it should default to the 2016 rule. And the reason that I think that is because when we promulgated the 2016 rule, while we were waiting for states to get up to speed on implementation, we defaulted to the 1993 rule. So that was the last appropriately promulgated rule. So it made sense to me. I have a lot of hope that the Biden administration is going to settle, and I have some hope about the 2016 rule being like, we don't have to go through, I'm hopeful that we don't have to go through a whole nother regulatory procedure. I'm hopeful that we can just default back to the 2016 rule. And then we have to figure out how much time states will have to collect the ICWA related data and the LGB related data that were removed from the 2016 rule. And I'm sure that's a debate. I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to say. Is everybody still awake? Oh my God, I'm so proud of you guys. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Heather. So we have Diana Wagner, who's going to be joining us virtually. And while we queue her up, I just want to give a quick context that, so now we've heard about the legislative efforts in the last few years that were driven by tribes. We've heard about updates about litigation driven by tribes in the last few years. And with these last few minutes, Diana's going to tell us about AB 2083, which was a legislative effort in the last few years that tribes were left out of. And so the department and tribes and the other state agencies that are involved with AB 2083 work are now looking for ways to include tribes, to consult with tribes, which is now required. And Diana is going to give us an update on that. Diana, are you with us virtually?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes. And can you see my screen?
We are pulling your slides up right now, Diana, so they'll be up in.
Okay.
Oh, we can see
Hey, Diana, if you want to share your screen, that would be perfect.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we're good to go.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Diana Wagner. I'm calling in this morning from Northern Wintu Land in Northern California. And it's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Diana Wagner, and I am a member of the 2083 Children and Youth State System of Care team representing California Department of Social Services. And just wanted to pull this out and really highlight this because part of AB 153 was that we actually added another component into the mandated portion of the development of the MOU with county interagency leadership teams. And with that, it is to develop a process through tribal consultation with federally recognized tribes within each county for engaging and coordinating with the tribes in ongoing implementation of the MOUs. And so in order to implement this piece, we have been in the process of jointly developing an ACL. It will be signed by all departments. We have received feedback and suggestions and changes by tribal members that we have been able to incorporate. And also with that ACL, there will be a sample tribal consultation policy that will be released. And this is something that the tribes can work with the county interagency leadership team to determine if that is something that can be used. And then there just is the expectation that there is a process that is developed with each of the ILTs and the tribes within that county. So right now, there is the final draft that we are looking at being approved by all the state departments. Those departments do include Department of Healthcare Services, California Department of Education, Department of Developmental Services, and also Department of Social Services. Once that final approval is obtained, it will be released for formal stakeholder feedback, and then we will be incorporating that feedback with the goal of it being released in early July. And then with the implementation, there was an introductory email that was sent out to each ILT and tribal representatives. And please, if the very last slide gives an email, if you did not receive an email, please email myself or our shared email box, because that means that I did not have an email available for you. And I want to make sure that you are connected with the county ILT team at the local level. With the introduction, that next step would be that there be a local process that is developed in order for there to be consultation with the tribes on the MOUs. And with that, there should be a process of reviewing the MOU in its entirety and incorporating feedback from the tribes. And changes should be made. And there are a couple of counties that are still in the process of developing their MOUs. And so tribes should be a part of the development of that MOU. As far as the state level engagement that has been happening, there was a webinar that was held in February of 2022 with county interagency leadership teams to really ensure that they understood ICWA and the importance of tribal representation and tribal involvement when it comes to Indian children. There's been ongoing technical assistance that's been available to ILTs and tribes upon request for both the implementation process and development of MOUs and also child-specific. There will be a follow-up webinar that's going to be developed in collaboration with tribes to be provided for additional guidance and best practices for ILTs on inclusion and consultation processes with tribes. The state system of care team is really open to hearing any recommendations of how we can better support at the local level your involvement with the ILTs. And then we have had CDSS, Office of Tribal Affairs, is included in our weekly state system of care team meetings. And I've also begun the process of developing with the other state departments, Office of Tribal Affairs or tribal liaisons, so we can really coordinate the work in our efforts. And if you have any questions or comments, or you did not receive an email earlier this month, please feel free to email me.
Great, thank you so much, Diana. Thank you for that update. Again, the 2083 work and systems of care work is really important that tribes be involved now. These county-based interagency teams that Diana was talking about are currently making placement decisions about Indian children with complex needs. And so we appreciate the department giving the update and looking for ways to include tribes in the process moving forward. With that, I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists today. A big thank you to Keith Harper's firm, Jenner and Block, for sponsoring the MCLEs that are available through today and tomorrow's conference. So thank you to Jenner and Block for that. And thank you, Heather and Kimberly, Keith, and Diana.
All right, can we have the next panel come up? Stephanie, Tamara, Donald, Layla. Hey, babe.
All right, good morning and welcome to our next plenary. My name is Geneva Shah and I'm the Training and Curriculum Development Director with the California Tribal Families Coalition. Very honored and thrilled to be here with all of you today and over the course of the next few days. So our next session, we are joined by our friends, relatives, and colleagues of the Office of Tribal Affairs. In addition, Kimberly Clough, I think, maybe? No, Kimberly. Kimberly might hang out on this panel too. We'll see what happens. So this is really an opportunity for us to, one, kind of celebrate the accomplishments through and with OTA over the course of the last year. An opportunity to kind of hear some updates of where we are in the current, as well as get some insights into the work that's going to be happening and that we will all be a part of in the months and year ahead. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over for the sake of time to one of my favorite UROCs, Stephanie Weldon, and I will let our panelists introduce themselves individually too at the point in time that they take over the microphone. So welcome.
Ayukui, Neck now Stephanie Weldon, Wakplau to all of you and our team here. I want to just take this opportunity to thank Saquon and the Kumeyaay people for hosting this conference and for welcoming us on their homeland. And of course, a special thank you to CTFC for all this hard work and for having us here today. My name is Stephanie Weldon. I am the new director for the Office of Tribal Affairs, and I come to you from the Yurok people. I'm Yurok and Tolowa from Del Norte and Humboldt County, so I'm really grateful to be here and to be in this new role. I was appointed in November of 2021, so I'm just about 6 months into this great work and take this job very, very seriously as I feel the responsibility of bridging and uplifting and really helping advise the folks within the State Department and bridge the relationship so we can move the dial on ensuring our children are with their families and communities. We know all too well as practitioners and as Indian people, the experiences that our families and communities and you as advocates face. And we know how hard many of the state folks work and county people as well. So we really see ourselves as a bridge and have a lot of responsibility and take that very, very seriously. And we know there's so much more work to do, both at the county level and at the policy level. And so today we really want to share with you some of the things we've been doing this last year, but also hear from all of you about what we need to do differently and better to help move the dial on not only tribal consultation, but tribal advisement and policy development as well. I just want to share a couple of things that came from my teachings and my family and my community. So many things that were shared earlier by many of the other plenary speakers resonated so much with me, especially around kindness, love, and love for one another, and of course, perseverance and resilience. I want to just acknowledge my family that I was fortunate to be born into, family of advocates and fighters, both in my father and mother's family who are Yurok from the Klamath River, and just acknowledge how important the work that our family has done. With that, I want to just share a couple of things around that healing and resilience. As a very, very young mother, I was only a few steps away from potentially being one of our families that we serve. I have 6 children and 1 grandson. And we go through our ups and downs all day long. And so I've expanded our family from means of tribal customary adoption of 3 of my children. So I know all very well how important this work is and how important it is to me. And just with that, I want to share with you my oldest daughter. In our ceremonies, we sing songs for what's called a brush dance. And I usually don't do this too much publicly, but I've really been thinking a lot about our work. And I was moved in a lot of the sharing this morning. And my daughter means so much to me. All of my kids do. My oldest, she's so strong and resilient. She taught me how to be a mother when I was just 18. And when she was little, she had this beautiful raspy voice. And she came up with her own song. And I think about the work we do as children for healing of children, very similar to the ceremonies that we have up on the coast and inland up north. And so I want to just share that with you briefly to start us off in a good way, and so we can talk about where we're going and to settle my nerves for another thing. I want to just channel my my daughter Cecilia, because she's so strong and beautiful, and I'm thinking about her a lot this morning. And so I'm going to step a little bit away so I don't blow everyone's ears out, because I've got a little bit of a loud voice. But it's hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiya, ha, hey, ya, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way, hiyu, wayu, wayu, way. Ah. Thank you. So now to the business. We all know that we continue to see the devastating impacts of genocide and the continued today struggles of systematic oppression and racism, the leaving out, the not inclusion, the on the ground level work that's missed. And we continue to see our children removed at incredibly high rates and placed with non-native homes, or the lack of including the tribe, or the culturally appropriate and necessary services so our children know who they are and that they heal. So again, thinking of that, we've really worked to design and develop a revised strategic plan of who we are within OTA. Before I fully get into that, I want to just acknowledge the team that we have here today. This team, plus two others that weren't here to join us today, are amazing individuals that have worked in tribal communities, either directly serving as an ICWA advocate, or as a county worker fighting for our rights, or working in Head Start, or many of the other incredibly important work, or being in the courtroom and advocating. We all now have a vital role to help advise and do the work. These individuals here are committed, passionate people that teach me every day how to show up differently when I'm angry or frustrated, or when I need to slow down, which many of you know who have worked with me. I like to go really fast sometimes to get results and get things done. But I just want to acknowledge them. And if you could all just clap for our Office of Tribal Affairs team and show them some appreciation. This conference was so important to Tamara and I that I might say this jokingly, but it is the truth. We made true active efforts to be here at this conference. Let me tell you, she can break down the stats because she's tracking the data better than I am. After a full day of almost going to Canada, then back down here when we're from California to get here, driving 3.5, 4 hours to get to an airport that would not cancel our flight. We are here, we're a little tired, but we are here and ready to go. So just know that. When telling my husband, he said, I guarantee you're going to use that story. And I said, you're darn right, because we have to explain and bridge what active efforts are. And that's, why I bring this into this discussion today, because we often hear the things of, we see court reports, or we hear the TA requests or complaints that, county didn't do this or that, or we hear a report, we see a report that says provided case management services. Don't you do that with all children and all families? So we then try to flip it to make sure they understand active efforts is going way above that for Indian children. The standard is higher because of the trauma, because of the law. So making sure that we try to translate things for people who don't come from our experience and worldview, understand those. And so they can better be allies and advocate and think of that when they're in policy, developing policy and monitoring tools. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move us into, I told them I was going to be short, or they would have to pull a, kick me, I said, or knock me on the head to get me moving. So I'm going to go ahead and move us into some key areas that I want to share with you about the work we're doing. And then Tamara's going to engage us in a few questions. So our staff, we already kind of shared, we have other staff members. I won't talk about all of them. And then, so just starting us off on our strategic plan. Our strategic plan that we're working on right now today is the launching of a revised, very, very draft plan to focus on for the next 5 years. The plan identifies our vision, our mission, guiding principles and goals and strategies, but it really was developed from initially from all of you and tribal leaders when OTA first took shape in 2017. It was developed through consultation. So what we did was revise and targeted on more key areas. And we really need to hear that, are we going in the right direction? And Director Johnson really wants to hear, is this the best use of the Office of Tribal Affairs? Is this the work that we should be doing? And so there are some key areas in here. We're not going to cover the whole plan today, just key highlights. The plan will be available electronically for you to review probably by the end of the conference. We've got to upload and probably do a few more finessing touches after we talk with you all today. So your input, all of you, regardless of where you work, whether you're county, state, or tribal, we want to hear from you, and particularly, of course, the tribes, to make sure we're on track so we could set our stage for the next 5 years. So just to key highlight, what's different about the previous strategic plan is that this plan is very progressive in that it grows and it operationalizes the goals. The last strategic plan, the vision was to do that, but it never came to fruition. We are now setting very clear operationalized strategies, and it really uses a continuous quality improvement method, measuring ways in which are we actually achieving these goals? And if not, why, and what's not working? And then really, of course, to make sure we're gauging how our work completes or achieves system change. And then our ability to achieve our purpose and mission, and then developing reporting, yearly reporting or quarterly reporting methods to share with all of you. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to our team to talk a little bit more about. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Layla DeRowan. I'm the Central ICWA Field Liaison, as well as the current acting manager. I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians, and I'm very honored to be here with you guys today. Thank you, cousin. No, just kidding. Okay, so while presenting for the first time for you guys to see OTA's updated vision and mission, and we're also going to show our values and guiding principles that are included in the strategic plan. So the OTA envisions a state that recognizes and respects tribal sovereignty and the rights of tribes to actively engage in ensuring the well-being of American Indian and Alaska Native children and families, and remediating injustices of the past, present, and future. Our updated mission statement. The OTA's mission is grounded in meaningful tribal consultation and engagement that elevates and assists in building the capacity of the state, tribes, and counties to collaboratively create and sustain an equitable continuum of care for American Indian and Alaska Native children and families. OTA's values and guiding principles include the team boldly embracing our unique roles and bridging issues, from tribes, counties, and state. We believe in accurately representing tribal experiences and worldviews brought to the Office of Tribal Affairs. We believe in being solution-focused. We recognize the harm that has been imposed by governments on tribes and Indian children and families. We believe in listening to tribal elders, leaders, and spiritual leaders. We believe in exemplifying cultural humility to build trusting relationships between tribes, counties, and CDSS. We believe in equitable access to and distribution of resources. We honor tribal sovereignty and uphold our commitments. We strive to have our work be reflective of tribal voices. We believe that CDSS, counties, tribes, and JCC have a shared responsibility to protect Indian children and families. We believe tribes should be invited to the table early in the process, and we believe that a collaboration of tribes, CDSS, counties, and JCC should address any issues that impacts tribes. We respect different beliefs and cultures and honor the differences between and within tribal communities, and we believe in taking care of ourselves, each other, having balance in life, and supporting and honoring all of you who engage in this work to improve the lives of American Indian children and families. I'm going to turn it over to Donald at this point. Thank you.
Lechochon, Natwani Donald Rodriguez, Gabrielina Shoshone. Completely humbled and honored to be here on Sequan. Thank you so very much for hosting the event. We have a set of strategic plans and goals, but we know what that ultimate goal is, right? We want 100% ICWA compliance. We want no tribal child within a foster care system that is placing children outside of their culture and outside of their tribes, because we know with that Indian child, there is a sovereign nation behind them, right? And so there's got to be at least one person within that sovereign nation to be able to place that child in. So why is that child coming into care? We're trying to figure that out, right? So in order to attain that lofty goal, we got to put these measurable goals in place in order for us to continue on, of course. So I'm going to read some of these to you. Number one is to increase OTA's internal capacity to effectively address challenges facing the state. So this small but very mighty team is out there. We're trying to do as much work as we can, but we do need some help. So we're actively recruiting. So we do have a central ICWA field liaison. We have a northern ICWA field liaison. So please, if you're interested and you want to join this fight on the state level, let us know. Goal 2, improve engagement between tribes, CDSS, counties, and stakeholders. We all gotta figure out where we're at. We gotta figure out our different perspectives. And sometimes they're not always gonna match, but that's why we should sit down at the table and we can discuss it, right? So we're always trying to figure out ways how to engage further. And to improve state, county, court, and JCC accountability. Always hearing this from tribes. Where's the accountability? So I'm gonna say that again, that accountability for effectively executing procedures and practices that impact tribes. Now, we're sharing you with all these goals, and if for some reason we're not achieving those goals, we want to be held accountable to that, right? So please let us know. Please let us know. All right, so with the enhancement part, we want to increase OTA's internal capacity, like I was saying, come join the team. And increase OTA's access to programs and systems intersecting with ICWA. Anything where there's ICWA, we want to be a part of. We know that's the gold standard of social work, and we know that's not happening in this state. So we need to do something about it, right? I know we're running short on time, but if these materials we sent to you, please read those and send us any feedback that you have. Engage, we want to improve state and county court, like we were saying earlier. With this part here, inform policy and program development, advise and facilitate technical expertise on state laws and policies and programs, and design and create processes for monitoring complaints. There are a lot of complaints out there. There's a lot of good work too. We also want to uplift that. We have a lot of counties out there that are doing great work. A lot of tribes are doing amazing work. So we have to take in these complaints. We are logging these. If you guys want to know further about what kind of technical assistance that we are providing, we're also having a breakout session, little announcement there, to come see what we're doing out there. And we'll go individually into the different types of technical assistance that we are doing, and also share with you our strengthening ICWA practice survey, which has some pretty interesting data there as well for those data folks. So Heather, a good job on the data part. Advise to improve engagement between tribes, CDSS, counties, and stakeholders. Like I was saying earlier, just figuring out where we're all at. And as for us, my experience here, the 2 years with OTA, we're really showing you all the cards that we have on the table, the things that we are working with, the things that we're trying to do. We are expecting that from counties as well. We are expecting that counties are also sharing their data with tribes, as that is part of this work, right? So how to get that done? It's a process. There's a lot of room for improvement, but we are here to help that process continue. So I think next we're going to go with Ms. Tamara. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tamara Hunrado, and I hail to you from the homelands of the Yurok and Wiyot people. And I'm so happy to be here today with you all. I see before me some great Northern California ICWA advocates, tribal representatives, and folks in the field that I know are working their butts off every day. And I just want to honor you and thank you for being here. I'm very new to OTA and its role. Previous to this, I was representing tribes, specifically the Yurok tribe. And coming into this new role as a consultant, I feel like my role is still being defined and figured out. So we really appreciate your feedback. Yeah, other duties as assigned. We appreciate your feedback and are looking for your interaction with us, your sort of bridge to what's happening at the state. I think something really important that Kimberly Clough said earlier stuck out to me, which is the policy that happens behind closed doors deeply impacts people disproportionately touched by it. And that's all of you in this room and the families and children you represent. So we ask for your engagement with us on what's happening at the state level, particularly through our strategic plan. How can we help you realize the goals of your tribe, the goals that you have within your tribal social services departments and impacting children and families and seeing higher rates of reunification, maybe seeing more preservation activities up front, access to state monies that you may not have known were out there, sitting there waiting for you to grab a hold of. So we want to hear your engagement on all those things. So here I am to get your feedback. So as far as our strategic plan goes, I know we just went through the goals really fast. You know, there was a lot of key things that Donald pulled out that I think are very important and vital. 100% ICWA compliance. What does that mean and look like in our courtrooms, in our practice? So what in our goals would help you fulfill, or do you believe our goals help us fulfill that mission and vision? And then do these goals then reflect back on your tribe's priorities for the OTA and supporting and advising the CDSS, California Department of Social Services, the whole big thing on improving outcomes for Indian children, families, and tribal, I don't know what that means, but tribes essentially. If not, what is missing? So I'm gonna actually take a moment and ask, I'm looking for Delia or someone else to have a microphone. And I'm going to get your engagement right here and right now. I know it's, if not, we're going to call on people because we have a lot of people we know in this room. And we're going to force you to talk, but we want to get your initial feedback. We're not looking for some deep analysis. We're looking for how does this plan hit you right now in this moment, July, whatever we are, 13th, as it relates to the work you're trying to do in the field. What is your initial thought? And that's about what we should be doing and how should the plan reflect the work that you're hoping your tribe is wanting to have happen at the state level. And so raise your hand, stand up. We'll look for someone to circulate to give you the mic. See somebody back there? Laura?
So we don't have an additional microphone, so we
Oh,
really
crap.
encourage you to use your excited Game 5 of the NBA Finals on tonight inside voice.
Or come up on stage.
And
I don't
Tamara
care.
will repeat what you just said.
Oh,
that the
okay,
virtual
good.
participants can hear.
I can repeat back what you said, if I can hear you. So the question was, how can a relatively small tribe that doesn't have a FORI agreement secure state funds such as prevention funds in order to get access and assistance for the children of the tribe, I assume is what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, so these are things that actually we are building directly into our plan. I'm just collaborating with my team. We're very collaborative. So we're building these exact questions into the plan to inform the plan. And I think, you know, a lot of tribes have that concern and question because a lot of tribes aren't willing or able or want to, or tribal leadership doesn't want to or whatever, get into a tribal Title 40 agreement. And we understand that and we see that, but we think there are pathways to access and we're going to work that out in collaboration with the leadership within CDSS who can make those things happen. And we will give them really great TA to do so, but we're adding that into our strategic plan. But for immediate, those kinds of literal questions, when you're saying, how do I get into an agreement to access these funds? We would really like you to start to email us at at dss.ca.gov. I think that's on one of our slides. Capital T, capital A. Other immediate, what is the strategic plan? Again, this is for our Office of Tribal Affairs within CDSS. How does this plan hit you? That's great. So the feedback from the audience was it's really exciting to see accountability built into the plan, particularly around things like the ICWA hotline, and I assume also the ICWA data dashboard. How is that going to be built into the strategic plan for accountability and oversight? So that's a really amazing question. We're taking very good notes. And I think, what I hear in that question is accountability doesn't mean just setting a goal. It means following up with the goal, setting next stages, timelines, and plans around the goal. So I think we're hearing all of that, and we definitely want to incorporate that into our plan. And then Stephanie.
We have a plan explaining our role in the ICWA state plan, which those things you just mentioned, Fawn, are a part of it. So part of this is how do we strengthen our TA to advise the rest of our partners within CDSS, who we are partners with in supporting and helping them develop these kinds of strategies. And so part of that will be us advising them and giving recommendations and ideas of how to be accountable and how to measure that and how they may think about that when implementing to counties, and supporting and brainstorming with them and partnering about how to operationalize those things. So it's not just to check the box, the goal's done, and then to report back out with you. Maybe that wasn't the right intervention. Not only achieving the goal, but looking at, we tried this and it didn't get the movement, it didn't move the dial a little bit more like we had wanted. So that's the building into the plan, is one, documenting the efforts that we've made to advise, and then reporting back out to all of you. Because OTA's role, we don't necessarily develop the policy. Our partners do within CDSS program staff, but we advise and we are part of that process and sharing that lens and informing and advising in the cultural lens.
Okay, so I think we have time for, oh, good, 2 hands. Go ahead, sir, stand up and just yell at me. Mhm. 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 Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much. So the comment from the audience was, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, why is the tribe responsible for training the county on ICWA? And I can tell you, as from personal experience, being an ICWA attorney in the courtroom and living this sort of practice of ICWA, it does baffle me, I think, when there are folks who seem to not even know about that the law exists, for instance. But I can tell you that we are deeply thinking about that and wondering how we can best disseminate down training opportunities to ensure that we are getting folks on the same page while recognizing that counties are under a lot of strain and stress around turnover, staffing, things like that, that challenge the ability to continually retain the ICWA knowledge that we expect them to have, and I think it's not just an expectation, it's the legal realities of what the law says, and really communicating that to practice is what we're deeply interested in figuring out, and doing that in partnership with the Child and Family Services Division and other divisions within CDSS. Do you want to say anything else about that? Okay.
Because our team is so small, we don't necessarily do training out in the field. We utilize what's called technical assistance or tools. I know a lot of people hate that word, technical assistance. Our staff does utilize the tools we have developed, but with the whole state, really that's in the purview of the program and policy shops. But what we can do is inform and build that in to advise where they have training contracts. And the more that tribes say there needs to be more training in the field, I bet you counties and tribes would likely align on that, or how that training looks. And because we've advised internally about that a lot, and we've heard that at consultation, so we can continue to grow that and incorporate that into the operationalizing of the plan. We definitely hear that. And an easy thing, I think, that we can do now that we're getting back out in the field is our field liaisons can make those contacts even more so. We have 2 out of 4 right now throughout the state, but sharing that desk reference, because that is a starter place. That's where we start externally with counties, and internally we say, have you read the desk reference or gone to this section in the desk reference? Because it all lays it out there really well. It's not the easiest read, but it really lays it all out there. So relaunching and ensuring that the county ICWA points of contact are a resource and utilized in a way that all of their teams know about that desk reference. So that's a key easy win that we could utilize, but training is a bigger topic that we can definitely work to advise more so on.
All right, so I'm going to take one more question, but I'm going to invite everybody else to come to our breakout session where we can really explore these questions a lot more deeply and also hear back from you, and invite you to respond. You'll see in the next slide, we have a survey that we put out, and it's SurveyMonkey, really easy to use. So we invite you to initially put your feedback there. You can be anonymous if you choose. You can also disclose which tribe you're commenting from. All of that's extremely helpful information. So I'll go ahead and take your question. Yeah, so the question or the comment from the audience was, what do we do when we just don't have a good relationship with the county, or the county absolutely refuses to actually come and collaborate with us, which we know is a reality, and we hear it, and that's why we have Donald and Layla to go strong arm them. No, just kidding. But maybe a little bit, so there's that assistance and pathway, I think, through what we're going to call intensive TA. But it's a way to get folks to understand the mandate of collaboration, not just as an active effort, but as a core foundational how you work with tribes when there's a tribal child that is being impacted by the system in some way. So I think what we can do is just put our thoughts around that a little more and absolutely build into the accountability and the measures into the plan, how we're going to really achieve these goals. We hear you, we know, and we live these experiences as well. So we want to invite you to really comment and come to, we know there's so much engagement happening at the state as far as opportunities, but we really need to hear your voice at those engagements. We really want to hear your perspectives and feedback, that of your leadership as well. We need to hear those voices that will continue to inform what we're doing at the OTA, and we can help assist other departments within CDSS to do the same. I just want to really quickly run through the timelines on the strategic plan. Where we're at today is June 13th. That's where we're hoping to roll out at least the first look at the plan. And then our goal is to send out a hard copy, AKA an email, to you with the plan attached for your first look. And then also OTA will be working with CDSS leadership as well as CFSD leadership, Child and Family Services Division, to do an engagement plan that includes on-site in-person discussions with tribal leadership, tribal social services representatives, tribal reps, generally advocates, to talk about the plan. And then on September 22nd at the ATCS, our acronym, I don't even know what Annual Tribal Consultation Summit. I'm a noob, so sorry about that. That's when we will actually be doing the in-person official consultation on the plan. So what's next? Sorry about that. We want you to go ahead and take the survey if you can, Survey Monkey. We just want to give you a second to look at that and go to your phone, insert it and respond to the plan, just initial reactions. I'll leave that up. Go ahead, Stephanie. We're going to have Jennifer Parsons come up.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Parsons. I'm honored to be here. Thank you to everybody who works in this field. I have to get closer, sorry about that. I'm a member of the Pawnee tribe, and I'm also a former foster youth. And I'm committed to this team and this work because it's systems change. And a lot of what you hear from us is on a bigger level, but everybody in this room impacts Indian children and families on individual levels. So thank you. I'm going to rush through that. So as many of you know, we've been working on updating CDSS's tribal consultation policy. And this is a really big systemic tool that we use to guide the department on how to engage with tribes and tribal advocates. So we have gotten lots of tribal feedback, and CDSS is currently working through that. But at our last Tribal Advisory Committee, we heard, hey, can we get an extension? We have some more feedback. So some of the key areas that are being addressed in this revision of our tribal consultation policy are related to timelines, incorporating specific timelines into the policy itself. And so providing a little bit more accountability and, you know, all of us knowing what to expect and what's expected of the department. Now I'm going to skip us to some timelines because we need to save some time, but this is just some of the key dates on the recent history of our tribal consultation policy. Currently, like I said, CDSS is analyzing the most recent tribal feedback, but there's still time if your tribe or your tribal organization has some things to add to that. I do want to say that a lot of other state departments are looking at CDSS's Office of Tribal Affairs to use potentially as a model for other departments within the state government. So, you know, it's going to help inform a better state government overall if you take a little bit of time. And we extended the review period until May 27th. Some next steps. We're going to release a second round of the TCP. We're giving more opportunity, and then comments are going to be due August 25th. It's going to, the third draft, we're anticipating to release it on September 8th. And it'll be hopefully presented, it's going to be presented at our annual tribal Consultation Summit, and we're hoping to have final comment review done in October so that we can get that policy finalized. And if you have any comments, if you've had it, or you would like to request the most recent version, you can go ahead and give us an email at a tribal consultation. And I am going to turn it back over to our Stephanie Weldon.
Okay, I know we're short on time, and I just saw a text Delia sent me an hour ago saying, go ahead and skip the questions. So I think I missed the text there, but we did a few questions anyways. We break rules sometimes, but and thinking about ICWA, many of you may be aware, and some of you may not, that over the last year and a half, the Children and Family Services Division, along with OTA, launched from tribal consultation and from initially the APSR, the development of what's now the ICWA state plan, which is really to pull all efforts together under one umbrella and to develop measurable timelines. Really, it's a strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years, from identifying huge gap areas and to address those and to take meaningful, thoughtful time together. And so initially OTA took the lift of facilitating that plan. However, that plan right now is owned and carried on by programs, and Angie Swartz, the deputy director, leads that plan. And she's over there. If you want to say hi, Angie, wave. You'll see, some of you have met her. If you haven't yet, go say hi to her in between the breaks. But her and her team will lead that with the support of OTA. And so this plan really lives within many different shops, and the plan really is to move the dial on ICWA, and counties will be soon joining that discussion because they are the ones who have to implement the plan. So there are key areas, but really the roadmap is to guide CDSS's work to address disproportionality and equity in the system, to identify short yearly goals and long-term objectives and strategies, and then to create measurable targets that will demonstrate program effectiveness. And as a reminder, this started back in 2020 through consultation, the APSR consultation, which tribes showed up, and particularly CTFC asked for some very specific objectives to be addressed. And those were the foundational key pieces. They are the key pieces of the ICWA plan, along with other work that's going on. And so those objectives are in this PowerPoint. You keep hearing us referring to a data dashboard, an ICWA complaint line. All of some of those pieces are in there. And these were those original 8. These are not the only objectives, but you can look at these further. And then just the timeline, so you all are aware, is that tribal consultation will be occurring, the first one on this plan for you to review. A new version will be coming out very shortly. On 6/22, the invitation and the updated plan will be sent out for consultation on July 22nd. And that consultation, we hope to have hybrid, I believe still. I just want to acknowledge Summer is a new manager for CFSD, and she's over here. She's been sitting with us. She's helping support the work of this ICWA state plan. So that meeting, if you have questions about that meeting, Summer here's the person to ask, just to put her on the spot. That meeting will be hybrid in Sacramento, and we're still figuring that all out, but that will be official consultation, which the plan will be talked about, as well as timelines and a steering committee who will help oversee the implementation, a joint steering committee. And so those are just key areas to be aware of. And then again, I think the goal is to finalize that plan by the annual Tribal Consultation Summit in September. So as you know, put that date on your calendar, because a lot of big heavy items for consultation for tribes will be on that agenda. And we'll be working through those areas to launch some good, important work. So a lot of that again comes from listening and experiencing the work and seeing it all. And so we can help partner internally. And so I know I'm probably over on time or pretty close to it. Just want to thank you all again. And please grab one of our team members or myself and let us know where you really think things should be, and then come to consultation where you can. And we'll be sending out more and more bulletins so you all know what's going on, and do your best to cruise through those so you can keep in tune and let us know where we are with things. Thank you again. Thank you very much.
I just want to one more time thank you to the team at OTA for really bringing representation to the state level and amplifying tribal voice. And just may we all kind of continue to partner with you and pushing initiatives forward and continuing to make progress at all levels that trickle down and impact our communities in very positive ways. So thank you to our friends, relatives, and colleagues at OTA.
I have been informed that the first adage for a conference needs to be invoked, which is that the brain can only absorb as much as the seat can stand. So we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll resume with the tribal court panel. So please come back promptly. Our ideal is to finish up in time for lunch. Food. So this panel is titled Role of the Judiciary and Upholding ICWA. I'm going to introduce the moderator, and then he can introduce his panel. One thing that has struck me is that none of us wants to be judged by our worst moment. We all have things we would just as soon not be broadcast. The parents who appear in front of us, the family members, we have to remember that they too don't want to be judged by their worst moment. I know, for example, that Judge King and I, if our worst moments were known, we would not be judges. So part of the human condition is understanding that we all make mistakes. We all have room for growth, and we're all human beings. So I'm going to introduce Judge Larry King, who I'm not quite sure how Morongo pulled it off, but they stole him away from Crit. I don't know if they had to do draft choices or it was a cash deal or what it was. But Judge King is now at Morongo. And so I'm going to introduce my brother.
All right. Do I have Judge Shapiro on the line?
Yes, Commissioner Shapiro is here. You can't hear me. I mean, see me though, but hopefully you can hear me.
Okay, we're working on the visual.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Judge Dionne, she's the Chief Judge for the Intertribal Court, Southern California. A person who I can say is my friend, and I butchered her last. Oh, a person I can say is my friend that I butchered her last name. Her resume is in the program, so I'm not going to read that. I think everybody can do that. Then I have Judge Shapiro who serves as the judicial officer for Los Angeles County Superior Court, ICWA courtroom, again, in the program. And then I have Judge Christine Williams from the Yurok tribe member, who's now the Chief Judge for the Wilton Tribal Court, and a little shameless plug, also the president of the California Tribal Judges Association. So having said that, I was asked to ask questions as it relates to ICWA courts going forward. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with Judge Williams, who runs a collaborative court to ask her, how do you think collaborative courts, while we work on oh, she's on, good. How do you think collaborative courts enhance Indian children's outcome in ICWA cases?
Hello. Well, thank you. That's a great question. So I previously did work on a joint jurisdiction court when I was the chief judge for the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. And I was there for 8 years. And we had a court where we actually sat, I sat with the Superior Court judges from El Dorado County, and we heard child welfare cases together and made orders together and case plans together, and the whole case would proceed with both tribal and state jurisdiction acting concurrently. And that's under Public Law 280. So sort of one of the silver linings of Public Law 280. Currently, I'm with the Wilton Rancheria Tribal Court, and we have not implemented joint jurisdiction yet, although the county knows very openly that that is my intention, and I'm supported by the tribe in doing that. At Wilton, we recently hosted a pretty large gathering with the Sacramento County. They have an ICWA courtroom, and so we had this ICWA work group that supports the ICWA courtroom work come to the Wilton Rancheria, and we had a gathering around assisting the county in creating a land acknowledgement. So land acknowledgements are big right now. A lot of you probably seen them, heard of them. It's where you acknowledge the land of the people that you are on. So they wanted to create one. And so in assisting them, Wilton spent a half a day kind of giving them the history of the Wilton tribe, being the federally recognized tribe that's there in Sacramento County. And so instead of kind of answering their question, we felt like we told them how to go about doing that. But through that process, we were able to have a meeting in person. We had food together. We got to sit in the same together. And it created a sense of community that I think slips during COVID, where we haven't seen each other in years and in person, and we've been doing things by Zoom, and all of us probably fell into a bit of like a COVID fog, where, or at least I did, just not seeing your community at all. And family togetherness only goes so far, and then you kind of need to get with some other people. Right, it's a lot of family time. So even our strong families need a break. What I would say is, and I'm going to just go on a bit of a tangent, but stay with me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Neighborhood Watch program. So it started, I think, like in the 70s or something. And when I moved to my first house that I bought with my husband, there was a Neighborhood Watch program. And the concept was basically that police, it's sponsored by police and law enforcement, usually locally. And the idea is that if you know your neighbors and you know who they are, and you could recognize them by their face and their name, and you kind of know how many kids they have and if they have pets, and just get to know each other, that you're more likely and better prepared to have a safe neighborhood, because like, hey, I don't know that person. Why are they going to Tom's door right now? And oh, hey, I see you're out in your yard doing something that's a heavy load. Can we help you lift that in the house? And it just creates more of a sense of community. And if you know the people that are in your community, you're more likely to talk to them, help them, assist them. And it's just sort of the way humans are. We want to work on our big global issues, but a lot of it really starts at home with the people that you know. And it's hard to sort of like keep some stereotypes up and some misconceptions up if you're getting to really know people. So I've always been a big fan of that. I'm a convener, so I jumped on that neighborhood block thing. I was like, yeah, let's do this. And every year there's a national night out where you have a block party and you just kind of get to know everybody. And I tell you, it worked. I mean, I think it created a community on my little street. So why am I talking about that? Because I think it really plays into the work that we do in the Indian Child Welfare Act and what the role of the judiciary is. So I don't hear ICWA cases because I'm a tribal court judge. So what I hear are child welfare matters involving Native children because they come in through the tribe. I don't deal with the federal law or with the state law. I deal with tribal law. So laws passed by, in my case right now, the Wilton Rancheria tribe. And that's kind of my world, but it intersects with what all of you do in state court. And so I think that our role is to sort of strengthen the communities that we're in and also help to sort of reach across the aisle and build those partnerships with our state and county partners. That's what I think my role in the judiciary is at this point. And then sort of looking at ICWA and how that intersects when I'm thinking about some of the comments earlier, specifically Keith Harper from Jenner and Block, he talked about the Brackeen case. I know everybody's really stressed out about that. What's going to happen to ICWA next? And I just wanted to remind everybody what I think, again, my role is to strengthen the infrastructure at the tribes and to help make sure that our county partners know what we have available, how to access us, and how to work with us. So if you look at ICWA, what does it say? Notice. Maybe if ICWA didn't exist, we wouldn't have a mandatory notice component anymore, right? So what does that mean? We as tribes need to know what's going on with our families. Our families need to know that if they're in crisis, they can come back to us at the tribes. And if you have a court, I'm a big fan of starting a court. That's one more branch, that's one more department, that's one more person that can care about that and can be available to tribal people. Placements. If we don't have a federal law mandating placement, then what are we left with? So the ICWA placement preferences start with what? What's the number one preferred placement for all ICWA cases? Family, relatives, relative placement. That's the same as in all the other federal laws and all of the other state laws, all of the other state laws that govern placement of children who are being placed in out-of-home placements. So we still have that, okay? So what does that mean? We need to strengthen our families. We need to make sure that we have family placements ready, at the ready to go. So when we have our families in crisis, we can say to our county partners, you don't have to place with this particular family, but we have a family that's ready. We want them considered. That's still the law. That's still going to be the law. And then finally, active efforts. We pretty much, so the tribal people in this room doing work as tribal representatives for tribes, we are already the active efforts. You are the active efforts. You know that. What makes the difference between what's available for the county for any other child and what's available through the county through your child is typically stuff that's offered by tribes, tribal agencies, whether it's Indian Health Services. I know there's some Indian Health Services people here. So what I'm saying is, I think ICWA is going to survive, but if it doesn't, we are going to survive. Okay, we are resilient people. And we're in a better place now, I think, as Native people than we were when ICWA was passed initially, to say, we still have these resources and our sovereignty comes from within. It was never given to us by ICWA anyway. All it did was place mandates on states. Thank you. I love being cheered at.
All right, Judge.
Am I passing it?
Hold on one second. Okay, take a deep breath. Okay.
Mindfulness.
We're gonna come back to you again.
Okay.
All right.
Well, so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
So I'm gonna go to Judge Shapiro, and I'm gonna ask her a question since she's on video and everybody can see her virtually and here in the room. So you're in a dedicated ICWA court in Los Angeles County, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. How do you view your participation in that court, and how does it enhance the well-being and outcomes for Native children?
Well, our goal and our efforts are to ensure that we uphold the ICWA and both legally and in spirit. And what we do is we invite participation from tribes, whether they're federally recognized or not, to sit at the table and participate. And I see my role as making sure that everyone has access to justice and the support of the tribes where there are tribes to be involved. I primarily handle the cases of children who are not home of parent if they're transferred in from another department, unless the case originates in my courtroom. And because in those cases, the active effort standards are not necessary to be found on the record. But we are working with the tribes and trying to ensure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that notice is proper and involving the families. And the one thing I'll state based on the questions that Micah had sent out is that we're implementing the use of the ICWA 100 form. And I have to thank Ann Gilmore for bringing that to my attention. The ICWA 100 form enables me to receive information in writing from the tribe as to active efforts and helps us ensure that the tribe is working together with DCFS in making a plan appropriate for the family to help reunify the Indian family.
Thank you. My chief judge. Come on, Dionne. So I'm going to ask you, you're the chief judge for an intertribal court. A lot of different tribes. How do they react with their counterparts, their state counterparts? And do their state counterparts rely on them for contacts to be able to get notice to, et cetera? And if you don't mind, because that way we can see your smiling face.
Okay, well, howka everyone, hello. Dionne Lomayesva, I'm a member of the Ipe Nation of Santa Isabel, so thank you for having me here today. You know, the Intertribal Court was established back in '06, and currently we have 12 federally recognized tribes that are members and 7 that have joined us with a memorandum of agreement. So we serve nearly 20 tribes in Southern California and beyond up into Central California and even a little bit north of there for a variety of items. And certainly the most important item and most case heavy is child welfare, including conservatorships, which is a growing area in Indian country, at least in Southern California. In my role as the chief judge, as Christine Williams said, you know, I'm practicing tribal law. We're enforcing the aspects of tribal law. We don't have ICWA on the reservations. ICWA does not apply to tribes. So tribes pass their own laws for what they see fit for their communities. And a lot of people don't understand that. And some of our tribal people don't understand that. And that's why it's so important to work and to advocate with your tribes so that you know that you have the ability to pass laws that make sense for you as a tribal community. And then I also still practice, and I am in state court very often for a tribe that I represent. I work with Saboba. And so I get to see kind of both sides of how ICWA is going on and how it's transferring into tribal court. So sometimes I think that experience is a blessing and a curse, but we keep going and we try to use that experience and that input to build the best programs that we can in the court and in the Saboba Tribal Family Services program that I work with. So right now, the tribal court does not have any joint jurisdiction agreements, but what we do have are 12 tribes that inherently we collaborate together because we too have a judicial council that is the governing body of the court, and we meet monthly. So you have representatives from each tribe, those delegates sharing what they're doing, the types of laws that they're interested in passing, what their priorities are. There's many members that have brought up, hey, how could we have joint jurisdiction within our tribes? In San Diego, and I know this is similar in many other tribes in California, you have relatives on every reservation in the county and beyond. So you need that collaboration. You have parents from tribes that are across the street from each other. The children are enrolled in a different tribe. So that collaboration is vital, that we know what each other have going on, that we get to know each other's police departments, social services, whether it's your own social services or through one of the Indian Health Consortiums. It's vital. So we inherently are joint jurisdiction just by the nature of being formed as an intertribal court. But we also do work with the state. I've been honored and pleased to work with Judge Ana España, the presiding juvenile court judge who's been very, very supportive and active in San Diego County in reaching out to the tribes. We currently have a San Diego County Justice Collaborative where we have OTA and Donald's been participating, Judicial Council of California, and Vita, and then Tom Lido with Tribal Law and Policy Institute have really been committed to this effort to see that ICWA is complied with in San Diego for dependency and delinquency, and also the way that the intertribal court works and our other courts. Paula has their own tribal court in San Diego. So it's recognizing that and just knowing that little bit of information can really go a long way when you're talking about how we're all going to interact. In an effort to address the issues of the day, our collaborative first started with data collection. I've talked with a lot of the judges that are here today and that we collaborate with each other, and there's just not enough data out there on Native youth at all. We have to get our statistics from other sources and kind of piece it together. And I've heard it been said that if you don't have the data, you don't know the numbers, you don't know how many of your youth are system involved, then you don't really have a way to prioritize that. And as tribal people, as tribes, we have a right to know where our youth are at all times. And tribes are increasingly taking jurisdiction over their youth. The San Isabel Band, our jurisdiction from the Children's Code extends everywhere in the United States. And that code has been tested and utilized successfully to bring those youth back to tribal court. So this can be done. So there's lots and lots of different ways to collaborate. Just quickly, I don't want to go over too much time. Our court has also embarked upon a tribal youth court where we are working with our member tribes to bring at-risk youth, either on a voluntary basis or tribal citations, school referrals, into a wellness court where we can get them on the right path. We've also recently applied with the San Diego County District Attorneys, and I think we're still working on probation so that we can be a diversion program for the county for Native youth. And we're hoping that this is going to be kind of a game changer and that we'll be able to keep our pulse on where our Native youth are and provide them culturally relevant services and directly with their tribes, if they so choose, in order to get back on track and to become the members of society that we know they can be. So with that, I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Just for now. Okay. So I'm going to ask another question here. I'm going to ask Judge Williams who will come up, but and to dovetail on what you talked about, how important is it to bring our kids or actually have kids that are in the state system transferred back to a tribal court? And then this corollary question, how important is it, do you think, and I'm going to ask Judge Shapiro this, so pay attention, is the qualified expert witness in ICWA matters in state courts and then bringing them back to tribal courts?
All right, well, hello to everyone online that I missed last time. I think it's incredibly important. I'm biased. I'm a judge for tribes. That's what I've been doing for the last 12 years or something. So I'm a huge supporter of tribal courts. I think it extends tribe sovereignty. I also think it provides an extra resource. So when you're talking about bringing it back to my community, the neighborhood watch thing, building community, judges like to talk to judges. That's who we're comfortable with. Lawyers talk to lawyers, probation officers talk to probation officers, social workers talk to social workers. So I think it really helps, if you have someone in that position as a judge for your tribe, they don't necessarily have to have gone to law school. They can be someone from your community that you just trust to be a decision maker, to be a person who resolves disputes in your membership. Right. So I think it's hugely important. I hope the work I've done as a judge for tribes has increased their sovereignty and improved outcomes for the children that we serve. I also think it's important to note something. Judge Lomaez was incredibly modest. She's a judge for like 12 tribes or something. And is the model court for intertribal courts in California, which is a huge benefit to tribes to be able to leverage resources that are difficult to come by. So it's great to be on a panel with you. I look up to her in so many ways. But another thing she mentioned was those juvenile delinquency cases. So a lot of times those are already not being categorized as ICWA cases, right? But I bet you care about them. Are you saying, oh, it's not an ICWA case, I don't have to worry about that? No, you still have to worry about that youth, right? You're already doing that work outside of what is being determined to be ICWA, which I don't always agree with that determination, but that's, I'm not in charge of everything yet. So, the work that is being done with the tribal court on delinquency cases is huge. We're diverting kids out of juvenile hall. We're finding kids that are being sort of, the school to prison pipeline early and getting them into a court that has people there that care about them in a way that it's almost, and sometimes is, like family. Qualified expert witness. I think that is also hugely important because what it does is it checks the system bias. So institutional bias is why ICWA really was started in the first place, right? It's this entire misconception about Native communities that presumes that children are better off growing up in a non-Native community than in a Native community, even if that's their family and their home and their culture. So the qualified expert witness is there to check that institutional bias and say, all right, is this removal justified because the child is in danger, or is this removal part of bias, or is it both? Where are we with this case? And basically setting the tone to make sure that we're not having Native children removed at a disproportionate rate when it's not a case of abuse or neglect, and also to see, did this family get appropriate services to prevent this removal, or did people turn a blind eye because this community is not familiar to them? So I think it's a game changer to have the right qualified expert witness for me.
Judge Shapiro.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to add is I don't have any connection to a tribal court judge in Los Angeles County. And I'd like to say to everyone participating today that if there's anyone who wishes to collaborate or work together on something more collaborative in Los Angeles County, I would very much welcome it. I think that it would be highly beneficial to our Native families in Los Angeles County to have the expertise and the knowledge of tribal courts to help guide us in properly servicing the families. With respect to data, I just wanted to add one thing. We're working on a comprehensive data collection of our Native families, our youth, and the services that they need, and trying to get that information so we too know who we're trying to service and what we're trying to do. And with respect to QEWs, I think it's extremely important. For many of our cases, we don't have QEWs from the actual tribes. I have the department providing a state witness with QEW. And one of the things that we're working on is in conjunction with the ICWA 100 forms to try to ensure that we get as much input from the tribes as possible in conjunction with the QEW statement to be able to make the right decisions for the children and the families. And so I think it's extremely important, especially to hold everyone accountable for the best practices and also to do what's best for the Native families and the children to have that input of the QEW.
All right. Thank you. I'll be more than happy to come over anytime you want to work together. And I'm just down the street, I-10. And okay, it'll work. But I don't want to let you go so much. See, one of the problems that I have with this entire system is that when I worked as a state court judge in the state of Arizona, okay, and then I'm a tribal court judge too. It was really fast to remove kids, and then we put everybody on a timeline of how we want to go to permanency as opposed to family unification. Now that's always in the background, but there's never really an exception that was made or encouraged if you thought you were going to exceed that timeline. And that's just, how did we deal with that with ICWA dedicated court? But also, how do we deal with the situation where we have Family First Prevention Act that says we don't want to remove the child, we want to keep the child in and bring those services to the family as opposed to take the child out and then you're on your own, go get counseling and everything else?
That's a very loaded question.
Yes, it is.
And one of the things that I'm working on with all the attorneys and the department is to try to service the whole family and try to prevent the removal. And we're trying to push for the department to be much more involved at the start of the case, to be able to make active efforts findings at the inception before the actual removal occurs.
Okay.
Many of the cases that are before me now were already in before, and because of the onslaught of the Court of Appeal decisions, I'm dealing with a lot of the reversals now, but our focus and goal is to try to keep families intact to begin with. In terms of the statutory timeline, I have a timeline that I have to work with, and the same way that it's not fair to Native families necessarily, we face the same kinds of issues, and I'm not comparing it on the same in the same manner, but with people who have substance abuse issues and are not Native families, and who also are forced into a timeline to comply in order to reunify. We do have the ability to extend services through 388 hearings and motions, and also under 352 in California with the discretion to grant additional service time. So we're working on trying to make sure that the services really involve the customary and tribal practices so that the parents are not just given referral packets, but are actually aided in their reunification through meaningful services. And I keep pushing that ICWA 100 because I feel like it's providing us with the groundwork to ensure that the agency and the tribes communicate effectively so that they work together on a plan of reunification that's meaningful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, keep going. Come on, you want to add? Come on, you might as well.
All right, yeah, well, this
Yeah,
involves her. Judge Shapiro, hi.
Hi, how are you?
It's good to see you.
Nice.
So you gave me an idea, because I think this is an ongoing problem with counties who want to do better, are inspired to try to collaborate with tribes, but don't have either a federally recognized tribe in their county, or there isn't a tribal court to partner with, as you know, joint jurisdiction and all the other fun programs that Judge Lomiespa and I are working on. And so she's also on the board of the California Tribal Court Judges Association as, are you vice president? Okay, yeah. So I'm president, she's vice president. So we're going to take it back to the California Tribal Court Judges Association to see if we can't incorporate those judges that are from counties that don't have a court to partner with, don't have a tribe to partner with, and see if we can get you onto one of our calls. We meet 6 times a year, I think it is, to just like have a dialogue and see if there's something we can do to start. Because and I think this is probably true for a lot of your tribes, but in the Yurok tribal custom, we believe we're responsible for the wellness of like the whole world. So it starts at home, you know, but when you have that kind of responsibility, it's not just about what I can do at Wilton or what I can do for Yurok or what I can do for my own family. If there's a way that, you know, we can work together to spread good work and better outcomes, I'm hoping we can do that. And that doesn't just mean for Native children either. I'm hoping all of us are doing work that provides a model for better outcomes for children in foster care across the whole nation. And maybe, you know, we can look at other Indigenous models across the world, because it's a global problem. We all have kids, they all need care, families struggle. So that's my hope, is that we can reach out to you and get you in with us. And no, we're not in your county, but I think maybe it's a start. So I'm glad you brought that up. See, these are great, these conferences. Even though you're not in person and we are, it's still, we're making connections.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well, you're welcome.
All right, so I'm gonna call you Dionne because you're my good friend, family member too. So as a judge, which you have all these intertribal connections that you deal with, tribal youth court and all these services, et cetera. What I'm finding, and this is something I got from the Robert F. Kennedy Foundation for Children, their children's lines, we have a lot of dual status youth. Youth that are in the dependency system, youth that are in the delinquency system. How important is it for tribes to be able to provide services to assist state courts or have state courts transfer them over? Because we may have more services. Can you address that issue a little bit, please? Oh, as well as the cultural aspect that we bring to it?
I wouldn't leave it out. So I think in many ways, this question I can better answer as a tribal attorney and just going to state court. And, I think in a lot of ways, I've had a lot of really good courts with regard to ICWA, a lot that need some work, but it's absolutely vital for the tribe to be in there from day one. Everybody wants to talk about, we want to prevent removals. We want to, stop the case before it becomes a case, but you can't do that if you don't actively, as Stephanie was saying, do the active efforts as soon as humanly possible. And, as someone else in the audience said, the social workers, the people on the ground, the first responders, they have to be the ones that know this, because we can all talk about it on a policy level and we can make all these laws, but if people aren't aware of it, it doesn't matter what it says. So in the intertribal court, we get to see a part of the tribes where we're in all the inner workings, right? So we have developed relationships with those tribes on every level that is out there. So we know each other, right? We go to gatherings together. We see each other at Indian Health. We know who we are. And even, if you're a non-native person that works at the tribal court, you get to know them and you become a community. So it's much easier to pick up the phone or send an email and get a response when you make that effort to know who each other are. And when you go into a state court in a courtroom, it's unfortunate that oftentimes you're ignored and you sit down and nobody asks who you are. Maybe the bailiff asks who you are, and then they might say, okay, well, just wait here. That's not how it should be. And if we're truly partners, then tribes need to be acknowledged. The attorneys can't always be there. Every tribe doesn't have an attorney. And even if you have the money for it, the attorney might not be there. Our ICWA representatives are equal to us in that representation. So you have to have that community. You have to have, and as Judge Williams was saying, let's bring the judiciaries together. And we're working on that on many levels within the state, but we can do more so that we feel comfortable coming in and you feel comfortable seeing us and you get to know us. A couple of courtrooms I go in and they go, oh, Miss Loma is, sometimes it's good to have a difficult last name. And that's not even the most tough Hopi name out there. So I'm lucky on that end. So, talking about, the services and the things that we provide, in our youth court, for example, that is coming online, it's going to be complemented by our Agave project, which is the Office of Victims of Crime grant program that we're launching in order to create a court that has wraparound services. So it's not just the court and the case. It's also a youth wellness court. It's also a resource center, a family resource center. So all those things, the cultural component, that it's just there. Our tribes have been really interested in how we're doing this youth court, and they're talking about bringing back traditional ceremony for these youth that are coming through that I'm not going to be a part of. That's not my role. This is going to happen on the reservation with the tribe and the youth. And then they come to me. Then they come to the court and we work them through their wellness plan. And we send them and their families and their parents and anyone else that needs the support to our family resource center so that everybody that needs to be a part of putting this puzzle back together is going to be there. So I hope that answers your question, Judge. And I know it's time for lunch, so I'm going to stop.
Okay. Normally, I would ask if anybody had any questions, but I don't want to stand between you and eating. And Judge?
Thank you, Judge Shapiro, for joining us. Thank you to three of my favorite judges for being here. You can see now why they are so well respected. It's not about just processing a case. It's about figuring out how to help families, how to succeed, because we only succeed as judges when the families succeed. Termination of parental rights is not a success. Foster care is not a success. It's a success when the families succeed. And you can tell that these three judges are committed to that. So thank you all. We are fortunate today to have lunch hosted by the Paula Band of Mission Indians. So let's give them a round of applause. It's through sponsorship of tribes like that that we're able to keep the costs down for you so that you can be here, you can participate. For those of you who are online and virtual, please don't wait for that doorbell to ring because we're not delivering. So the sessions will start up in the breakout rooms at 2 o'clock. So enjoy your lunch. Thank you to Paula, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock.
Thank you for having me.